Good morning, everyone. This is episode 47 of the Three Buddy Problem. I'm back with my buddies Juanito and Costin. Costin checking in from Romania, where they just finished their election season. Can you give us a quick wrap up? I understand a mathematician from the Math Olympiad is one of your winners. Give us a quick recap of what's going on over there.
Yeah, so the very famous mathematician Nicu Șordan, who actually is one of the very few people who won the Math Olympics with the gold medal twice. And he did so with a perfect score, and only 25 people in history have managed to achieve the same. Is going to be, and is, the new president of Romania through the power of blockchain.
Congratulations. What does that mean through the power of blockchain? Because I saw that they published the results on the blockchain.
We were like kidding and joking that we need a blockchain, right, to record all the votes, and you need to vote with your ID card that has a chip inside. And what do you know? Like in Romania, it's already almost reality. So all the votes were recorded in a blockchain that anyone can download, inspect, and it guarantees that the winner is the one that we want the winner to be. Something like this.
That's what the blockchain says.
No, not kidding, of course. But it's funny to see how things happen in reality, and that this blockchain was actually implemented through a governmental directive. There was a governmental directive which said that all the votes need to be registered in a blockchain, which I only found about after the election finished. So to me it was a bit like secret. Surprising.
So you wouldn't fuck with it, you know?
Yeah, but somehow it worked out, guys. It worked out. So we have a new president. Someone said, of course, that after you guys canceled the elections last year, you didn't expect for the other guy to win, of course. But I mean, yeah, of course.
I think we were all worried he was going to win.
Everyone right? was. Everyone
I was very surprised when you were like, oh, the Math Olympiad guy won. And we're like...
Oh, which just nice. Yeah, it's unexpected, but everyone's like, let's see. We're gonna see how a mathematician fares with managing a country. Like how will that go?
If he fucks this up, we'll never grab another educated person ever again.
Juanito, why aren't we putting our votes on the blockchain? In all seriousness, is this like a pathway to some sort of verification, some sort of elections integrity issue? Why aren't we leading in this?
Because there's no money to be made in it. No, I don't know, man. Like, so our issues in the U.S., as far as I understand them, have very little to do whether like the record is immutable and verifiable. Like that's an obvious problem with any election, but our issues are much lower down the chain of like gerrymandering and like ID.
Same things we talked about last week, voter ID.
Yeah, ID compliance issues and like, can you get an ID in the first place and like all that kind of nonsense. Which is not to say that this element doesn't matter, but it goes hand in hand with like a bunch of other stuff. And I don't know, man, like I think this is an area where the US is most deficient, mostly because of like the federal versus like state level division.
Did you say most efficient or deficient?
Deficient. I hope it was.
Most deficient.
I didn't hear it clearly.
Massively deficient. Deficient. It's a disaster, right? Like you have this like supposedly federal process being run by 50 different states at different levels of organization and different standards with different whatever. And then you have local governments implementing that below that standard. It's impossible. Like, how do you, unless you standardize the whole stack, like, what are you doing?
Gotcha.
So our issues are organizational.
For the record, I think it's funny to say that the observers sent by the US government afterwards, they gave like a statement and they say, wow, the elections in Romania are really advanced. We have a lot to learn from this thing.
Really?
Which to me was impressive on one hand, but you have to know one thing, that voting stations, they closed at 9, and basically by 12 we knew who the president was. Like counting the votes took about 3 hours, something like that. That's all it took.
Blockchain math. Chainalysis determined who the president was within 3 hours.
Congratulations on your return to democracy.
Thank you.
Hopefully you join the rest of
Sure.
the world and we get a mathematician helping us to count up there.
Fancy
took only
elections.
Something like 2 days for the U.S. Embassy to say that they're
They
happy with the
congratulated him
results.
officially.
They didn't. They didn't. That's like the most impressive thing. That only 2 countries didn't congratulate him: Russia and the United States. And the United States, after 2 days, they said something. They're looking forward to work together, but they didn't say congratulations.
So we have ambivalence towards it, or probably not entirely happy. Can we pivot to the news quickly? I wanted to start. We got a bunch of stuff to get to. I want to start with the top. We have a detailed report from our friends at CISA. CISA's been in the news lately with all the cuts and all the uncertainties surrounding there. We got a new report here on APT28/Fancy Bear GRU Unit 26165. And the emphasis here is on Western logistics providers and technology companies that are servicing the Ukraine war. I think the tone of this advisory from CISA was like, if you're one of these companies in this defense industry, transportation hub, maritime air traffic, IT services, and you're doing anything related to Ukraine and so on, assume that you've been targeted. They didn't specifically say breach, or they didn't specifically say attack. They talked about heavy targeting. Costin,
Right.
I know you spent a lot of time reading this new CISA report. What do you make of this? This is wartime. This is wartime targeting that we should be expecting. But what do you make of the quality of the report and what we learned from it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I noticed there's a lot of co-authors, and they say co-sealers, so you just contribute with their seal on the report. And there's like a lot of countries in there, like the Czech Republic, Poland, Estonia, France, our Dutch friends, of course, Canadian friends, and the German, like the BND, the BSI, and the BFV as well, and our friends in the UK. So that's like a lot of entities put their seals on this report. So I had like very high expectations, of course. One thing I noticed is that Romania is also listed in there as being targeted. However, as I went through the report, at least this is my impression, that it's more of a summary of like recent happenings, and even not that recent. So a lot of this, I mean, it's been covered in blog posts for the past 2 years from many different companies. I can name just, let's say, Sekoia, Harfang, ESAT. So there's, let's say, a lot of this activity is already known and been covered in detail. Well, however, this is freebies, so you take what you get. Like whenever there's a report with IOX, YARA rules, I'm a happy panda. And in particular, I was super happy with the YARA rules. I said, wow, YARA rules from CISA, in a CISA report. And then, like, of course, cautious happiness, kind of cautious joy. I put all the rules in my test environment, and yeah, well, not surprisingly, they do have some false positives for one of the rules, which is, again, it's shocking. I mean, how many times has this happened? How many times did we get YARA rules from CISA to find out that they haven't been tested, they haven't been properly engineered? Whoever is writing these YARA rules doesn't follow the best practices. They don't have a meta section with details like hashes, the authors, and so on. So I don't know.
Why is that problematic? Does that
like
send you off on a wild goose chase? Does that like slow you down?
I'll give
Does
you an
it
example.
make up your work? Why is it so problematic?
Like, here's an example. So there's this YARA rule, APT28 headlace shortcut, which is broken in the sense that it finds Thunderbird, it finds Microsoft Edge, it finds Firefox, so it has false positives. So if you want to fix it, first you need to find some samples on which it triggers. So for that, people put a hash in the meta. You take the hash, you take the sample, you look and you say, so you need to play a bit with it. So it finds that sample, it doesn't find a false positive. Well, it doesn't have a hash in the meta section. It doesn't have a date, it doesn't have an author. So if you just take that rule out of context, you don't know who created the rule, you don't know who's responsible, there's no reference, and all of that gives you the impression that it's careless. That's the word. And it's a kind of a pity because the our Canadian friends, actually, I think I said it many times, they have a kind of a standard for how the meta section should look like. And that's like, how to say, the industry standard. And a lot of people follow that standard. I follow it as well. And it's a pity that an organization such as CISA they just ignore whatever the Canadians have put out and publish these YARA rules, which are careless. That's the sad word here. Not to mention, of course, the false positives. But like, to go back to what you were saying, the report, I thought it was interesting because it did include some IP addresses that were new for me, and they say that these IP addresses are involved in brute forcing activity. Of course, that you should investigate them, so they may overlap with VPNs as usual. But there is, how to say, a bit of new stuff in here. But keep in mind that it was mostly built on a lot of work from previous publications.
It's like a roll-up. It's like a big, giant, like,
it's kind of a summary. Like, you take, just imagine, you go to ChatGPT and say, give me the latest and the greatest on APT28 with the most recent activities and kind of targeting and malware. And let's
you feed
make
it a
report.
bunch of advisories, right?
You polish it a bit, you add some new stuff, and you come up with this. In my opinion, it's fantastic. Like, if you ask me what is the most valuable stuff in this report, I think it's the targeting, saying that there's companies in Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Moldova, Italy, Greece that are being targeted. To me, that is quite valuable. And mentioning the industries, again, this is quite valuable information to me. Together
what does targeting
with all the
mean?
other things.
What does targeting mean? They've seen a spearfish over some sort of email thing that says, okay, if you're spearfishing this company, they're being targeted. Sometimes I wonder.
Yeah, like, would be nice to say victims. So I think that a lot of people are shying away from saying victims nowadays, because the moment that you say victims, you immediately may become, I don't know, legally viable, liable, responsible. So that's why people say targeting. Targeting has like no legal implications.
But when you read targeting, you understand it to be victims?
I think that, and I'll tell you, like, honestly what I think. I think these guys, they have some visibility into what APT28 / Blue Delta, Fancy Bear, and so on are doing. I think they have some kind of visibility in terms of emails, in terms of network access, and so on. So they kind of know who gets targeted. I think they know who gets infected as well, but they maybe just can't get into those details. Typically what happens is they would reach out privately to their organizations in all these countries that are actually mentioned here, like Estonia, Denmark, France, Netherlands, and so on. And they will say, hey, we think there's a victim in your country. You better get in touch with them and let them know they've been successfully compromised. So sometimes this is kind of a giveaway. When you see the other authors, co-sealers in the report, you kind of suspect, so that's where the victims are. But at the same time, if I were one of these companies here, I would for sure take a look at this report. And they do have like a very, this is what we used to call the cannonball. They have the cannonball in there. They drop like all these domains, like DNS, dynamic DNS domains in there, and say like block or investigate all kind of activity which involves those. And at the same time, they have these domains which are typically used for all sorts of offensive stuff, like webhook site, fridge.io, frg.io, mockbean, pipe dream, and so on. And again, they say if you see any kind of traffic or
redirecting to these, right?
Yeah, but I'll tell you honestly, this won't be just APT28. They can be like a lot of many other things. So that's why I say it's a cannonball. But again, the cannonball is a good thing. You fire the cannonball, you block all this thing, and there'll be people complaining, especially people doing offensive stuff, vulnerability research,
Red team
red
guys, yeah.
teaming. They say like, oh no, you blocked our webhook site. It's not malicious. We use it for red teaming. So why did you block it? And I'll be like, whatever, it's a cannonball. So yeah.
Juanito, it makes me nervous when you're
Shut
so
up,
quiet for
it's
so
a
long.
cannonball.
It's okay.
He's building up energy.
I rewatched the last episode, and I was in such a cracked out, manic, exhausted state that I was just ranting over everybody.
There's nothing wrong with that. Don't listen to the listeners. Fuck those guys.
No, because I want to hear what Kostin has to say. If I'm keeping Kostin from speaking, I'm fucking up here. So
okay, I got a bunch of questions for you,
today's
though.
Today's a
just
collective
in response.
day. It's a very,
You'll be responding to Kostin because there's three things I want to get to here. One is quality of YARA rules out of CISA. There's an expectation that this is the US. Wait, I know you don't roll your eyes yet. There's an expectation that this is the US government cybersecurity agency and we should get a certain level of quality. I think that's the point Kostin is making. This is not a new issue. We've talked about this publicly in the past. People at CISA are very, very aware that we've been
small.
like...
What is the budget like? How many hundreds of millions go into CISA? We're going in the wrong way, right? It's not about money.
No. It's not. It's not that it's not about money. It's just like,
let me tee it up and then you go. Should we expect? Isn't the expectation fair? And why hasn't this been fixed yet?
It would be, but the expectation should be higher in this case, I think. And I think we're putting it in the wrong place, right? Like CISA in this case is kind of like, you remember when Project Zero was publishing tag blogs from Google?
Yes.
Tag didn't have a publishing mechanism. So it would just find a way to publish its stuff through Project Zero because Project Zero had a blogging mechanism that got through the lawyers and the approvals and the whatever. CISA, in this case, as insane as it sounds to say this, is the Project Zero of the situation. Not in skill, but just in the conduit to release a blog. Because there's like, as we noted earlier, there's like 20 fucking logos on this. And the co-sealants, in many cases, are just people who say, we agree with this finding and we are throwing the weight of our organization behind it. And in many other cases, chances are there's a lot that was written by one of these organizations or multiple of these organizations and then was all put together under this thing. So every time you said CISA, I kind of like shriveled a little bit because I'm like, the chances that CISA put together a major portion of this are, in my view, unlikely. The only part that I wouldn't be surprised if they did themselves is the YARA rules at this point because they're bad. But I personally trained some of the organizations that are on this thing to write YARA rules, and I'd like to think I did not teach them this way. And frankly, I pinged somebody while we were discussing this, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I don't know who wrote that. Let me look into it." So I'm not gonna say who, but it's one of the co-sealants. So you go like, who wrote them? I don't know. I am actually using this as an interesting use case for O3 right now because I
was just going to ask, isn't this shouldn't AI just be writing YARA rules? Shouldn't we have an AI YARA rule writer app already created that says, hey, take all of this and generate the most perfect YARA rule that includes all the metadata and all the stuff that Kostin talks
And if somebody would like to fund us to do so, please get in touch with us. But no, it's absolutely doable, but within certain measures in a much more complex system. I think right now the problem that you would have is, and it's a problem that you have across the board with all of these AI applications to things, if you can automate it, but the whole point of that is that it highlights the importance of the expert that's going to read the output and determine whether you got a good result. It means you can scale it. But you still need a Kostin, Vitaly Kamluk, Sergey Minev, somebody who's sitting there who's going to look at it and go, yeah, this is a good rule. Well done, system. Thumbs up. And what
Like
scares me
everything
with
else with
something
our
like
use of AI.
yeah, which is what scares me about highlighting that AI should be used to solve the problem that we're reading here, which is not these people have a lot of YARA rules to write, and it would be nice if they had some automation. Instead, is clearly nobody involved in this. I'm getting a phone call about this right now. And nobody involved in this
Put him
is
on,
in
put
a.
him on, put him on speaker.
No, I can't do that to him. No, I'll.
Like with the Coinbase scammers.
Yeah. The call is coming from inside the house on the podcast recording. Sorry, but in this case, what you're clearly missing is somebody who tested, who someone expert who looked at it and said, "Hey, this is not."
Who did the QA? Yeah.
Like Florian Roth and some of these other folks have released like YARA gen tools for many years now. We have ways to get you kick-started towards a good YARA rule, and it'll do like 60% of the job. You still need somebody to take that 60% and go, this is what's good, this is what's bad, this is the logic that we should add to it, etc. So AI is not the issue here, but the issue is very much what we're seeing with this report. I know for a fact that there are experts in those organizations that could have evaluated these rules and who would have known that they were good or not good. I don't get the sense that they did, which just goes to show, like, look, there's
this
a
report
shit
might
ton
not be targeting you guys, right? The YARA rule and that portion of this, like, let's throw in some things here, is not meant to be the final output of this thing.
But that's worse, right?
True.
Because it's not targeting us. We can fix the rule. We can determine the rule is bad.
Sure.
You're not targeting us. You're targeting a wide swath of people who just saw a government report come out that authoritatively says that they need to care about these IPs, these domains. Moreover, I'll tell you, in a publicly traded company, how comfortable would you be saying to your, as far as like your fiduciary responsibility goes? Let's say that this report gets dropped, before NotPetya, and a logistics company, say FedEx, goes, well, we looked at it, but we didn't think these were good IOCs. Then they get popped and they lose like $2 billion. And they go to court, which has happened multiple times now, and they argue that it's not their fault because this was an act of God and an act of war. And somebody
and the insurance
says,
companies aren't
the
settling
insurance
these kinds of
companies
things, right?
are going to say, well, there was this report from CISA with 15 intelligence agencies that told you to look at this, right? So and that's just it's like this kind of straw man argument about like the onus of responsibility you are putting on these end users who should be able to take this report and say, something big is going down. I'm going to put these rules into my systems. I'm going to block these domains. I'm going to block these IPs. Like, it's not like I am just going to take it hook, line, and sinker. I'm doing my patriotic duty to defend my company, right? And it sucks when they, doing that may result in. Look, the cannonball is not as Kosin is saying, it's not a bad approach. If you blocked a bunch of red teamers, good for you too. Fuck those people. Like, it's not our job to make sure red teamers have an easy time. That's every time red teamers win, they take a shit all over the defense industry and go, "Ha, you see? Oh, you guys suck. We're so good at this." And then when you block something, they do like, "Oh my god, guys, that wasn't bad infrastructure. That was our stuff." It's like, yeah. Okay, good luck.
Listen to
Like,
Mr.
like, what the
EDR
fuck,
over
man?
here. Mr. Defender of EDR
You know how
over
much
here.
of a headache red teaming is for EDR companies?
Yes,
Every time some asshole red
you're so
teamer walks
agitated.
in and like takes a dance around, and they go, "We installed Cobalt Strike." Yeah, like, yeah, dude. I can't.
Juanito,
Whatever.
quickly, with targeting versus victimology. When you read targeting here, like, what's the nuance about what I'm reading? These companies, they've seen a couple of spear phishing things, or Costin believes they have some network telemetry that tells them there's some finagling happening there. Do we assume that when they say countries with targeted entities include Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, Netherlands,
Right.
Moldova, Italy, blah, 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 that these people have already been popped?
I think the bar for what you can put in a government report is fairly high. Which is to say, you asked about the language, you asked about targeting versus a victim. And the way I tend to think about is this might not actually be universally correct, but every victim is a target, but not every target is a victim, in a sense. that's not actually true when it comes to like opportunistic infections and like worms and stuff. But like give me in this particular case, let's just say that a target is a softer statement to make. You say the attacker made some kind of activity, action, or whatever that entails that they were interested in this organization. And some of those targets will have gotten victimized. They will have gotten breached and popped, but not all of them necessarily. And maybe all of them did, but this is where you see that like government hedging of like, this is what we can say within this high level of confidence. Can you say that they were full on victimized, that it wasn't like a third party, whatever, that it wasn't, oh, they got into an appliance, but they weren't actually able to move into the thing? Did every one of these organizations confirm it? Has every one of these organizations been notified and acknowledged that they were hacked? No. The answer is going to be no or maybe for most of those. So it's easier to just scale back and say these were targets. That's what we know. Whether they were victims or not, we're happy to have that conversation in private. But and part of this is also going to be like the standards are going to be different, right? Like maybe the Germans are extremely, neurotic about making damn sure that their victims are victims, and maybe the Bulgarians are not, right? Like who knows? So you get this kind of hedging. But to be fair, I think look, I'm being kind of negative about like the quality, whatnot. But let's approach this from a different angle. The amount of work it must be to get one of these things through the review process of 15 ultra bureaucratic organizations, most of them intelligence agencies, so who are publishing something public. And like there's an intel assessment that you're not burning sources. There's intel assessments that you're not precluding other activity, that you're, in theory, that your IP blocking that's fucking over these red teamers isn't actually fucking over some legitimate Western operation, right? Like there's all these sort of like equity bullshit discussions, and they may not be necessary. This might all be a 90% public reporting, but they had to go through that process like 15 different ways. So in some level, like while I think it's inexcusable to have not great YARA rules, I think it would be wrong of us to throw the baby out with the bathwater and not acknowledge that somebody went through some pretty hard work to put this in front of us. And I think that's commendable.
Is it likely that this was in the CISA pipeline as part of what they normally do, or this is new CISA focus on?
Stop CISAing, man. Stop CISAing.
I'm just
this
checking.
Is not. No,
you're my Washington D.C. correspondent, bro.
I'm saying, sorry, my cat saw a hair tie and he's like a freaking crack addict. Watch this. Watch this. You see it? You see? Right.
He doesn't want to talk about CISA. Kostin, one thing I noticed from the report very specifically was that they said one priority target is shipping manifests, including train, plane, container numbers about these companies that gives them visibility into what's going into Ukraine and when. And I'm just kind of putting it alongside how cyber plays a role in these physical kinetic war conflicts. There's a parallel effort that CISA highlighted, the report highlighted, around hijacking thousands of IP cameras at border crossing and rail yards that give them like some real-time view of the actual convoys moving along, matching up against these manifest things. I think it's just fascinating to get some documentation of the type of cyber activity we're seeing that go along in these wartime things, and that kind of defines what cyber war looks like today. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was another thing which caught my attention. In addition to everything you're saying, the fact that they attempted to use voice phishing in one case to impersonating IT staff in order to gain access to privileged accounts. So again, that is not often seen, I guess, with these people with APT28. And at the same time, having a glimpse into the cyber side, which kind of supports the physical activities, like all this intelligence collecting about the content of the cargo containers and train plane numbers and so on. This is fascinating.
What was your tracking name for this? This is real intel.
It's real intel.
Sorry, Kostin, what was your tracking name for Fancy Bear? What was the great tracking name?
Sophacy,
there we go.
Well, eventually you went Hades with if you go like the broader GRU construct. To what extent would that be right to stay?
that's a different unit, right? That would be a
Right.
different unit within that organization, like the guys responsible for the Pyongyang
Yeah.
Olympics,
Olympic
Olympic
destroyer.
destroyer, and this other Skripal poisoning related espionage against WADA and so on.
But I think that's where it's interesting, right? Because when we talk about WADA and TaskCast and IOC, like finding out about the arrests of like the Hades guys, and what that was brought up. A, it was brought up in the Mueller report, which is supposed to be about APT-28, Fancy Bear, etc. And B, I mean, we saw the WADA and early intrusions before we knew that that was related to some of like the public stuff, and that to us was APT-28, right? So I guess that's where I'm like, I'm looking at that as, I wonder sometimes if we should have been looking at Hades as almost like an initial access broker of some sort for APT-28 stuff that we would see later when you talk about some of like the on the ground operations, like the stuff the guys got arrested for in like, what was it, Belgium or the
Netherlands.
The
The
Netherlands, yeah.
Netherlands, yeah. I don't know if that is the case because I don't remember seeing them passing victims, but I may be wrong. I hope like one of our listeners can correct me if I'm mistaken here, and there has been a victim passing between the two groups. But my feeling was that, and by the way, historically speaking, the APT-28/SOPHECY guys, one of their main goals was to figure out if they have to launch the ICBMs, if there's like a nuclear attack going on, and if they need to launch a counterstrike, and when, and all these things, like understanding the strategic
Where is this documented?
arsenal. It's not.
No.
It's not. But like over time, their kind of scope widened, and then they became interested in extremist activities in the Caucasus, in all these breakup republics like Ingushetia, Ossetia, and so on. And obviously they just expanded, and then in parallel these other guys who like specialize in poisonings and targeted assassinations also developed cyber branch,
Cadet guys, right? Cadet
the
mission
the
guys,
Hades guys, and kind of complementing each other, if you want.
It's fascinating. It's just fascinating to me that the real-time wartime intelligence, how much it's changed, and how the cyber component goes along with it is really. It was nice to see in the report documented.
One of the things which I realized by looking at these stories is what you think you know about one of these groups today, like it can very quickly change, and like 6 months later they're doing like a totally different thingy. From like they were targeting one I don't know group, like ethnic group, in 6 months they're targeting the Pope or the Vatican or something else, and their mission changes, their tools change, and it's kind of, I think it's impressive when you can actually track them across all these operational changes. That's fantastic. But in some cases you kind of lose track and they disappear, as it happened like with others like Wild Neutron.
Fascinating. Juanito, you were going to respond to the wartime surveillance live look thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually the more fascinating part of Intel, and some of the this one of those areas where you see the clear disparity between what in cyber we would traditionally consider valuable targets or important to protect devices, and what in intelligence you would consider important to hack devices. Like we talk about, I don't know, Chinese webcams getting popped en masse all the time. You go, there's 40,000 Chinese webcams. They've all been popped by someone. Moving
It's
on
some
to the next
Mirai
story.
botnet. We go on
Yeah,
to the
it's
next
like
thing. Yeah.
some stupid botnet. Let's talk about something else. And it's really interesting when you consider that having 40,000 webcams in a country that you are in a war with is an insane strategic advantage of like any kind of like war strategizing that has been written over the past 3,000 years. would marvel at the idea of having point-by-point surveillance, video surveillance across another
Ports and
territory,
maritime ports,
Right.
yeah.
being able to watch and literally count how many different container ships were loaded with how many containers and what trucks came and at what time they showed up and how big were they and were they weighed and blah. Like that is a boon for an intelligence agency. That is actually ground truth level stuff, that where you go materially, we know this many containers have moved in and out of this port over the past 6 days. When somebody claims they're ramping up war production, they're getting new weapons, you go, no, they have the same amount of containers moving through the port that they move their weapons through as they did 2 weeks ago, right? Like that kind of shit is fascinating. And that's where you see this huge disparity between what cyber security traditionally considers worth defending and worth tracking, and what intelligence agencies actually treasure, value, and need.
Speaking of APTs breaking into things, I want to shift to the next story on our list, which is Sekoia. Costin mentioned our friends at Sekoia put out a report on Vicious Trap, which is an investigation of a threat actor compromising more than 5,500 edge devices and turning them into honeypots. More than 50 brands, Soho routers, SSL VPNs, DVRs, BMC controllers are being monitored by this actor, possibly to collect exploited vulnerabilities affecting these systems. Is this something we normally typically see? They mention here this is a Chinese campaign from an attacker of Chinese-speaking origin. But using those as honeypots to look for exploits and like try to trap vulnerabilities across there, it seems fascinating to me. Do you get a chance to read this report, Costin?
I did, and I know that.
Thank God.
I mean, we have to do the episode like I said, one episode we don't read anything in advance, and then we just put like a wig and a mustache, and we pretend to be evangelists and to be pretend to be experts on this topic without
you remember
reading
that
anything.
American spy that supposedly got caught by the Kremlin? Like I want to say it was like 15 years ago, and he had like a blonde wig and a fake mustache. It was like proof of him being a spy. That would be my costume for shifty business. That's what we're gonna call it. Shifty biz.
Shifty. Okay, shift biz. Shifty biz. We have to do that. But like I read like because I thought, I mean, I knew that some people were looking into this. I mean, there's been whispers of this for a while in some circles, especially with people running honeypots. So this activity was being discussed. To me, like the best image that I have in my mind about this is a book. The one from the Chinese writer Cixin Liu, which is called Dark Forest. So essentially, it feels that we are living in a dark forest where everyone's hunting everybody else. And you think, yeah, this is a threat actor? No, they're actually, I don't know, hunting other threat actors and turning your machines into honeypots to catch others. And then there's somebody else hunting these guys. And then there's someone else hunting those. This is a real fourth party collection, right?
It's the real three-body problem. Like
it's a real three-body problem. It feels like the dark forest. To me, it's fantastic that Sekoia decided to put this out. I think they know a bit more about who's behind it, and I think they know a bit more about some of the other things that this actor is doing. I think that would be good if other companies, researchers would be looking into this activity again, share more data, more URLs, because I know other companies have very interesting data on this, but I guess everyone is careful with legal issues, targets, not victims. Attribution might be a bit tricky and things like that.
Is there like some risk of implantation, your own business intelligence logic software involved in this to be able to monitor and track these things?
I mean, there's for sure a legal risk here. I mean, there's a lot of us running honeypots,
Feels
right,
like
in the industry.
there's a lot you're not saying, Costin. I gotta be honest with you. It feels
I
like
need
you're
to be
hedging and
careful.
hawing and
Look,
being careful. Why?
I,
You
I,
could tell me why you're being careful, but at least I'll help me understand why I'm being like why
because
you're fluxing around
I
this
have an
issue for me.
NDA in place. I have an
This is
NDA in place.
this is what you get for reading. You just you get grilled.
This is when you feel like the US when they have to talk about Seoul Typhoon, right?
No, I don't mean to. I don't mean to grill you, but for the audience listening
No,
is
no.
obviously going to realize that you're hemming and hawing and hedging on what you know and what.
I
But
tell
but
you
help
what
us understand why.
I don't know that much myself, but I know other people know a lot more, and I would love to see these other people also publish their reports on this stuff, because I mean, it's very tempting. I think it's very tempting when you do this IoT honeypot thing to think that, we don't have enough honeypots. We have like 50, but just imagine if we had 50,000 honeypots, and how difficult it is actually to repurpose one of these things to turn everything into honeypots, collect, I don't know, files, IOCs, indicators, whatever, from every compromised device, and try to hunt for anomalies. Now, there's some companies which actually they make a living from that. Look at the cat. That's awesome. You have to see this, like the video on YouTube. Like, it's the best thing to make your day.
You're very
I always feel
Very
like the
so
cat
happy.
gets blamed when you guys don't want to talk about something.
I would love to talk more, but again, I admit that I'm not the most knowledgeable on this topic. And other people, I mean, besides Felix, Sekoia, and so on, there's other people who also found and looked into these activities. So
get like John Outhouse in here or somebody.
Companies like Lumen, for instance, could probably
Danny
say a
Adamitis
lot more on this if they want it. Again, if they want it.
I should clarify
I can
that
be
this
ignorant
is.
as fuck on this if you'd like.
I should clarify that this is not Sekoia, the venture capital firm. This is Sekoia.io. Sekoia
nobody
is a
thought it was Sekoia.
Yes, it
Bill
was. Yeah,
Corn is not.
I have VCs
Bill
listening,
Corn
bro.
is not out here like
I have a lot of
pumping
VC
IOCs
listeners
and shit. Like,
Juanito, what is your take on this?
And I tell you a secret. The first time when I heard this name, I thought it was the capital.
Thank you.
company.
Thank you. When you keep saying Sekoia, there's a portion of our audience thinking
in
the
our
Sekoia
world,
venture capital firm
is just Sekoia.io.
This is a fairly new company too. So, and this is you mentioned Felix Aime, who's a former great colleague of ours, is one of the researchers over there. Juanito, you didn't get a chance to dig into this report, but do you have a take on this whole honeypot hunting?
Well, so first of all, like the first thing I thought of when I heard about this was actually whether this was the setup for an orb network rather than a honeypot, because that makes just a little more sense. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm saying that I would expect the ultimate utility of having this many devices, like it's a secondary thing to think of them as a honeypot, right? If an exploit comes,
territorial dispute too, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, also, like, why would you only use it for one thing? If an exploit comes, great, but that's an opportunistic thing that you just wait for. If you're telling me in the meantime you're sitting on 50,000 compromised devices that you can set up an operational relay box network, an orb network, which is what the Chinese are using for basically all APT operations around the world right now. It seems like leaving money on the table to only use them to wait for an exploit to come. Also, considering that you've already popped the device, so clearly you have some kind of
right.
Access,
but you're assuming the actor here is the APT, and the actor here is not some private sector research group as well in China.
I mean, that would be interesting, but if they're coming from China, I think you have to consider that there is a third player, which is the private sector operational relay box creating companies that are selling that service to Chinese APTs.
Right.
Like, that's part of the problem of the ecosystem in China is I don't think most of these orb networks are being operated by the APTs themselves or the government organizations themselves. I believe this
it's
to
farmed
be
out, right?
Yeah, this is farmed out. This is a third party company that's maintaining something and selling it as a service. And look, we do similar things in the US. Like anonymizer infrastructure for Equation Group was clearly managed by a company, but it was a series of VPSs. You had a company that was registering servers that were considered semi-anonymous and was creating a web of proxy trafficking. Um, and that's fine because it's technically legal within the US. But if that US company went and hacked a bunch of Soho routers across the world and created a proxy network and tried to sell that as a service to the US government, they would have a very hard time getting through any kind of legal review, and they would be in kind of a complicated situation. Not to mention that like Western cyber practices do not look comfortably or favorably at using infrastructure that is not their own, right? Like that, there you get into the actual territorial dispute. You hacked a router and you want us to go through it. Who else hacked that router and who else has visibility over it before we send our operational materials through that infrastructure?
This is what that feels like to me.
Oh yeah, the Chinese have an appetite for that. They don't give a shit. And in some cases, they have paid for it, right? Like we've seen companies like Lumen that will go, oh, look at these 40,000 compromised Soho routers. We now see all of these APTs coming in and out of this place, and they track the shit out of them. But the West would never accept that. But there's also the element of this that I don't think Kosin was skirting around, but that I'm too error prone not to skirt around, which is to say, if it weren't for our overzealous DOJ and the laws around cyber, I have thought many times about how easy it would be for us as defenders to hack all of these, to pop all of these vulnerable devices that are on the internet, dump the memory, and then go looking for what implants are on all these places. The appliance vendors are not helping us. The router manufacturers are not helping us. We have exploits because we are recovering them from what the attackers are doing. These stupid things are just sitting there vulnerable forever. Why don't we pop them, dump the memory out of all of them, are able to see what the connections are able to rebuild the malware, and then we restart them. And they're all disinfected immediately. Yes, they'll still be vulnerable, but that whole fucking network just went down. It's stuff like that where you go, there is some, I'm sure, would be reasonable, quote unquote, argument that is a terrible thing to do, but I cannot for the life of me make that argument in good faith. Like routers go out of service all the time. Routers and appliances restart all the time. Downtime of like 45 seconds because your router is restarting has never killed a human being, and if it has, that really wasn't the root cause. So this pussyfooting bullshit of like, well, we could, but then maybe a baby somewhere relying on a Wi-Fi router to get its oxygen might die, and it would be our fault. It's
Think
like,
about
yeah,
the babies. Don't be dissing
think
the
about,
babies.
man, fuck them kids.
Costin, they said the actor is likely of Chinese-speaking origin. Do we know how they got to that conclusion? Because I'm curious if this couldn't be anything else.
I mean, look, like I said, I have an, I have an NDA, but I can tell you one thing. People know exactly who is behind
Gotcha.
it. Not like just Chinese speaking, but
I
the
should
name.
take this report at face value. You trust that
Yeah.
Sekoia is publishing.
No,
What
it's-
Sekoia is publishing is 100% on.
Yeah,
Vibe,
sure.
vibe,
It's super
vibes.
solid. For sure, it's super solid. But I wanted to mention one thing as I was listening to Juan, and I was thinking, look, the temptation when you see like some kind
Why
of
isn't the
a
vendor
router-
themselves doing this? This is the thing
The
that's
vendors,
fascinating to me,
'Cause
right?
they don't
Like,
give
why-
a fuck.
I know they don't give a fuck, but it makes so much sense that they have the infrastructure to do it best. Like the Ivantis, the Sonic Walls, these guys should be honey trapping more than anyone else trying to capture exploitation or signs of exploitation,
They
right?
learned from Apple. What's the benefit of actually engaging and protecting and knowing and telling people You,
But
you know,
come on,
first of
you're in the
all,
headlines every week now. It has to
yeah.
start having an effect on
Well,
your sales conversations, your marketing conversations. I know it's not affecting your stock price because Fortinet stock
yeah.
price keeps climbing, but at the same time, I mean, it must internally, they must be having a security is fucking
I,
us over conversation.
so I think it's really funny because you mentioned sort of the EDR space. From the EDR space, when we have a bypass or a serious misdetection, I mean, we treat it like a 5 alarm fucking fire, right? Like the company is deeply concerned, and you put the kind of resources that are appropriate for, protecting your customers. And there is an expectation that that could cause you some serious heartache, right? Reputational and so on. Um, it's really fascinating to look at the appliance vendors and because like I don't want to talk about the router vendors, like the Soho router vendors, because those are margins games.
Those are
Like those
throwaway
those
things, right?
they are trash hardware. It is the definition of like hardware dumping.
You're talking about the
Um,
$50,000 edge appliance device,
I'm
this
talking
kind of
about I want to talk
impossible
about
to rip and
the edge
replace things.
devices.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at that point you are talking about a sizable investment, and you are talking about, reputational damage mattering, and there is an expectation of defense, and there are enough resources at some of these companies. Like Fortinet suddenly had like a threat intel team, and they were starting to like push out some reports here and there. And I feel bad because I'm sure that there's good people there who are trying. I just don't really get the feeling that their organization is supporting them to a level where, they're getting to be effective. Because we've discussed it here before. I think Kostin had the idea many an episode ago of like, well, why the fuck don't they just put their own appliances on the internet and make them look nice, and then just catch the exploits themselves and then fix them, right? Like, why don't we ever get a report from them saying, hey, this is what we did, and this is what we found, and this is how we fixed it, and this is what you need to do? It's always so and so told us that there's a thing here, and I guess we have to listen to them, so here's a fucking advisory, and then they move on. Like, it's this, you're dragging these people through uh this gauntlet, and they're not any happier for it. Like Fortinet, Ivanti, and so on are not walking out and going, well, that was a crisis, but we used it as an opportunity to grow, right? Like, no. It's zero fucks given. Why did you tell us? Like, we don't want to know.
Yeah, but
And
why
that sucks because
if I'm at
they're the ones
Ivanti,
in that position to know the most.
if I'm at Ivanti or Fortinet, why am I not calling Sekoia now and saying, hey, can we do this project in tandem so that you can kind of float me some things that I should be mitigating? Like, this is it just seems so logical and obvious to me. And it's not fair to say these companies don't give a shit, because like they're spending, they're
Why
patching,
is
they
it
have
not
security
fair?
teams.
I think it's fair to say they don't give a shit. It's not the
Well, true.
90s. It's not the fucking 90s. It's not the first time anybody's done this. It's not Katie Masuris inventing the first bug bounty at Microsoft and like people learning hard lessons the hard way because there's no path, right? Nobody has ever walked through this brush. So like Katie's out there with a machete clearing that shit, trying to figure out how to do it. And you learn some hard mistakes. Like, you make mistakes, you learn some hard lessons, and you figure out some wins, and they're hard won. And then you turn around and you go, guys, I cleared this path. This is what you should do. And people follow the pink hair and they get to success.
And that playbook is public and known. Like, other companies can pick up.
That playbook is super fucking public. It has been replicated a million times. It's been improved upon. It's been discussed. We've had keynotes. We have literal companies that do this now. There is no version of this where you get to feign ignorance anymore. What you can say is, well, they have a slightly harder situation in that they're hardware vendors, and they're coming at it with what looks like a fairly deficient update mechanism. So yes, you are going to have some difficulties on the ramp up, but there shouldn't be ambiguity about where you're going with that. And that's why I don't give them credit, because I don't see people who are like, okay, we understand that this is the playbook. We have been fucking terrible at this. We just hired so-and-so who's fucking awesome, and they now have these insane resources to revamp our company. We are going to become the security appliance vendor par excellence and fuck all our competitors, right? Like, that would be dope. That would be awesome. And it would take time, but then we would suddenly look at them as like, I don't know, the ubiquity of appliance vendors, the
Good.
whatever, where you go, why the fuck would you ever buy any of these other appliances? That's the one appliance that is like gold standard security, up to date patching, like perfect update mechanism, uptime, whatever. Their software is so good that exploits come about rarely now. And when they find one, they make sure to take out a whole class of these bugs. And like, you know, there's an SLA and there's a support, whatever, and they're inspectable. You can go check this thing, and like if you plug into this port on the hardware end, you can dump the memory immediately and see what's happening. Like, how fucking, I mean, I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but it's not a hard thing to figure out. Like the path forward is not the hard part. They just don't give a fuck.
It's hard for me to just kind of co-sign with they don't give a fuck, because they have a big security team. They're paying people to go. They're just saddled with technical debt at a level that it's impossible to recover from. Or
so start over.
True. I mean, this is what
they're not. It's not stopping them from selling these things.
Someone called me last week after I was dissing the pledge at length, the Secure by Design pledge and the new one coming out of the UK, to say, listen, this pledge is giving us budget. This pledge is like internally at these companies, this pledge is giving me kind of a voice to say, hey, we signed the pledge, so we should be doing this. The starting over isn't really an option. Trying to backport these fixes with the technical debt you've inherited is what we end up with Ivanti with open source thing that they shipped into the thing last week, like the configuration issue with Ivanti and the 0-day exploitation there. So it's a terribly difficult problem, but it's just hard for me to understand why they're seeding this bit of research, this kind of honeypotting of their devices to third parties when like it's an established norm everywhere else. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I think I understand why. I just think that it's an unsatisfying answer. Like this is they're old school companies. They do think that they can get away with it. And there is this question. Somebody somewhere has sat down with a napkin and said, it's going to cost us this much to improve, and it's going to lose us this much not to. And they go, those numbers are fine, and they moved on. And it's interesting,
or someone sits in the middle and says, let's sign the pledge and do a trade-off where we can kind of say this and we can kind of do some small things and make some nudges forward. That's what it feels like to me.
How many years later would you, how many years would you give them from the beginning, wherever, let's set an arbitrary date. Let's say that this shit show of circumstances started 3 years ago. I don't know. Like, I mean, the Ukraine war had a lot of reliance on these sorts of exploits. So
this is why Shields Up was a thing, right? It was,
So let's say 3 years ago. It's been 3 years since they became aware of the Swiss cheese, hardware they were selling and how it was being abused actively at wartime and across the world to fuck literally everybody on Earth. It's been 3 years. If you told me that they did this middle ground thing where they're going, well, fixing it right away, it's super hard, but maybe we signed the pledge and our whole goal is like, we're going to ramp up to the next generation of our devices being the ultra secure thing. And then we can deprecate all this other shit. We're like end of life, all this stuff, and just do a clean break with it. And we'll be like the new Ivanti. I mean, Ivanti already fucking rebranded once, right? Like
it used to be something else, right?
It was Pulse Secure. Like, right, I think like now we rebrand again to Vanti. And then it's the new next gen appliance that doesn't fuck you for
Actually, they were
it.
never Pulse Secure. Pulse Secure,
no.
Ivanti was
Cisco,
previously
right?
known as Landesk, Heat Software, AppSense, Wavelink, and Shavlik. They had 5 previous names.
But that's I think wasn't
they
Pulse
were all
Secure
separate companies
one?
merged into one.
Yeah, they bought all that. And honestly, I there's a talk by MJ Emanuel from like previous LabsCon, I want to say
LabsCon
2
1.
LabsCons ago, which
LabsCon
was
1.
like looking at the sort of evolution of the software of these things. And you're like, no,
They
LabsCon
changed.
1,
They
she
did
did
it.
the
They did
satellite
acquire
stuff.
Pulse Secure and kind of assume
yeah.
that brand. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, so like, but I would not be surprised, and I think MJ's sort of work was in this general direction, was like, I would not be surprised if like this software is basically like a collection of fossils. Like if it was literally like going into the Smithsonian and looking at a T-Rex, and it's like just like we dug up these pieces from Landesk and a piece from Pulse Secure, like a thing from whatever, and it's like PHP with bale wire. And moreover, I'll bet you whatever you want that if you dump that fucking firmware in front of us, that we would find code of different versions of the same software, like PHP 1.5 and PHP 1.7, and like like that kind of shit. And you know it's true.
It's all duct taped together. Yeah.
I will
It's for
fucking
sure.
bet you whatever you want. If I had the time, like we would do this, but it doesn't matter. It really does not matter, because my point about the timeline was, if you tell me in good faith they do care, they're just living with corporate realities, and you cannot fix and rewrite and change things overnight, nor can you do it in 6 months. Okay, it's been 3 years. How many more years do you give a corporation before you admit that they don't give a fuck? How many years do you give them before you go, okay, you couldn't fix this one, but there's another generation of Ivanti products and they have the same problems? Or like
corporations aren't humans. Like the AI isn't a human that can
Citizens
care.
United says completely different, my friend.
The point I'm making is that
feelings.
there might be folks internally there who truly care and who are truly trying, but they're faced. You know what I'm talking about. In every one of these organizations, these shitty organizations, we know a guy or two in there individually who understands realities, and they care.
And I am happy to shine a light on those people and treat them as heroes, but I don't think it's appropriate to give a company
a pass. I get it.
Because there's a couple of people working super hard to fight against the rest, the 98% of that company.
And these are the folks who are saying, stop fucking hitting the pledge. The pledge is all I have to continue to get a little bit of budget, to get a little bit of a stick internally.
Okay, so you know how we stopped like shitting on people who work at CISA and whatnot because like they're victims now, and like we're just hoping
we'll play with the cat during we'll play with the cat during pledge conversations.
Right, like
we just complained about the YARA rules.
Well, I mean, that is a objective complaint. I love Cyber Command, and I admire NSA and everything, but if they wrote a shitty rule, they wrote a shitty rule. I'm not saying they did. I don't think they did. I really do not think this was them. But I don't know, but I actually have an offer. Would you like to send some fixed rules to get republished?
Sure.
There we go.
Look, I did this before. I mean, I sent fixed rules before to people, and they said thanks, and they never got fixed. So sure, let's try it again.
I've got a different offer here. So send me and let's see. Let's give our friends a chance. But beyond that, let's talk about.
I wonder if there's ever gonna be an episode in which we don't complain about Ivanti or Fortinet or any of these vendors.
It starts to feel repetitive, to be honest with you. And I listen to the podcast, and we're saying the same shit every week. And I realized, like, this is what cybersecurity basically looks like. It's a microcosm of our industry, right? The same shit every day.
I was thinking that, like, another reason why nobody cares is that it's such a closed ecosystem. It's a closed set. So
black box,
If there's a vulnerability in Ivanti, what you're gonna do? You're gonna switch to Fortinet, but surprise, like those guys, they also have vulnerabilities. So everybody in this kind of closed set has the same security issues, and actually, it's best for everyone if they still have security issues. If somebody starts fixing them, that's an issue, because then everybody else needs to fix them as well. But as long as everyone's bad,
if everybody sucks, we're fine.
You know what that's
there's
called?
No problem.
You know what that's, Kosin, you know what that's called? Antitrust. That's what that's called. The fact that no one in this competition feels the need to fix their shit because if one of them fixes it, then they all have to fix it. Is a form of like anti-competitive coordination between mega corporations that is affecting the consumer disproportionately and negatively. Like that is why we put the kind of pressure that we do on these people. And frankly, this is where I go right back to resenting our overzealous DOJ and stupid laws like the CFAA, because I think that the right solution to all of this is Brickerbot. I think somebody should brick all of those Ivanti appliances. And then, only then, will we have a fucking reckoning.
The only thing is that they're going to sell more, like replacements. So that's going to be seen as a good thing. So everyone will say, can we get bricked as well? Please brick us too.
Don't be advocating for brickage. That shit is going to make a baby die in a hospital somewhere. Stop it.
The babies.
Speaking of the same shit.
Babies.
Speaking of the same shit year after year, day after day, same shit year after year. Do you guys have the appetite for a vulnerability disclosure debate?
Yeah.
Akamai researcher Yuval Gordon yesterday discovered a privilege escalation on April 1st, reported a privilege escalation vulnerability in Windows Server 2025 default installation that allows attackers to compromise, in his words, any user in Active Directory. Reported it on April 1st. Microsoft said, it doesn't fit the bar for immediate servicing. It's just a moderate severity vulnerability. We'll get to it later on. Guy says, hey, this thing is serious enough that people should know that this risk exists while Microsoft refuses to fix it. And he publishes a blog post yesterday. And he's taking serious heat for including attack details, like a full pathway to show how this thing could be done. He's taking some heat. Florian suddenly discovered the world of full disclosures is filled with ethical complications, and there's like been some social media debate. Kostin, you and I disagree on this, but I want to give you the chance to kind of hop on here. Who's in the right and who's in the wrong here?
I like the fact that we disagree, but we disagree constructively.
Well, you haven't heard my disagreement yet. Hold on.
I mean,
it might not be
first
constructive.
thing, you know what I was looking for? Where the CVE. So first thing I was like, if there's a CVE, that kind of compels Microsoft to fix it. So,
but who assigns the CVE?
Yeah,
this is something Microsoft would assign during the patch creation process.
So does it feel like Microsoft didn't want to assign a CVE here? Like it feels like
they could have given them a CVE and patch later, which they did at Black Hat. They did at Black Hat with another Israeli researcher. I don't remember the name of the thing. Downgrade attacks, the Windows downgrade attacks. They issued 3 CVEs during Black Hat, and then they patched it 2 months later. So there is a precedent for this.
Look, I politely disagree with this technique or tactic in which you kind of try to ransom or blackmail a company into patching it by making it like full disclosure, and then everybody starts integrating that into their offensive tools, and suddenly you have like a new WannaCry or whatever epidemic on the internet. So I think this can be done in a more ethical way, if you want, in a more coordinated way. I think that they could have just kept talking to Microsoft, try to convince Microsoft to explain that it's bad.
This is where my head starts to explode.
I personally
the onus goes on the researcher to beg Microsoft.
I'm on the side, and I tell you something. Like we were in the same position where we had a vulnerability, 0-day level vulnerability that was being exploited in the wild. In a certain version of Windows, and Microsoft refused to fix it. They said, you need to be administrator to be able to exploit it, so that doesn't match our kind of
they're bar. They have like a servicing bar, right? Yeah.
And we could have, of course, blogged and published and give all the details, and then other people start using it as well, but we didn't. We chose to respect what Microsoft said.
And I think that was irresponsible. I argue that what you did.
I
argue. Let me make my argument.
It's getting spicy.
I understand what you're saying.
My argument is that you were just joining an irresponsible party by leaving the entire ecosystem at risk because you have this hubris to know you're the only person who could have found this. That's the ridiculous part of this entire thing.
I decline the responsibility. I blame it on Microsoft. It's entirely Microsoft responsibility.
I agree.
What we have here, we could have had the same situation when it was entirely Microsoft's responsibility. Now I think it's Akamai's responsibility. It's
Ah,
no
no,
longer
no. I
Microsoft. Yeah, it's
completely
on
disagree
them
with you. I
No.
think
because they
Yuval
publish
Gordon
the
did the industry a
details which
favor.
allow massive exploitation of this in the wild. So we're gonna have
Juanito,
I-
keep
we
one of
used
us
to-
lot
honest.
of bad
No,
fallout
no.
because of the fact that they didn't find common ground, like negotiate whatever with
This
Microsoft
is
and get it
bullshit.
fixed.
Juanito,
But
you
that's
go.
an assumption that Microsoft is working in good faith. And Kostin, I'm with you. In certain situations, we have seen this, and it's more about like, like when we used to get pissed at like Threat Connect being the amateurs of the like TI space and going, look at me, I figured out this way to like identify all APT28 command and control infrastructure because of this certificate, and they would post it, and you go, fuck, that was the only way all of us were using to grab all of these APT28 infrastructure things. They fixed it within a week, and you're like, God fucking damn it. All you got out of this was a fucking blog, you goddamn amateurs. That was upsetting. But that's because we had this opportunistic thing that was asymmetrically benefiting us, the defenders, and it's a door that gets shut for the purposes of a blog. When it comes to vulnerabilities, I feel differently now that I've seen more of just how irresponsible and arbitrary some of these companies can be. Uh, yeah, they may not be suing researchers the way they used to back in the day, right? DEF CON, Black Hat, like we just gonna walk in and sue you, and that's the way to fix this. Okay,
They
fine.
found
They're
other
not
ways to
doing that,
stonewall. Yeah.
but they have found other ways to stonewall, including the bug bounty platforms, which have become complicit in this because they will NDA researchers and then let them sit in limbo forever, and that's fine. That's considered okay, right? Like I think the Project Zero was there was a kernel of brilliance even from the start of Project Zero in putting that timeline of saying we are going to publish this shit in 6 months unless you give us a really good reason, and in
3
that
months. It was 90 days. Yeah.
sorry, in 3 months, and unless you give us a really good reason, and if we extend that on the basis of your really good reason, it'll be another 3 months or whatever, another 2 months. It's not indefinite. And that's what the bug bounty platforms are missing, that makes it so that they're not um, co-conspirators
Conspirators.
in keeping people quiet and muzzled, despite the responsibility that those companies have to clients to protect them. And it's built on a an outdated thinking that doesn't take into account parallel discovery. And I
This
was
is
very naive about this in the beginning. Like I coming at it from the threat intel side and not from the vulnerability research side, my thinking was, what are the chances somebody runs into the same bug? I mean, super low. And then the more we hear from the VR side becoming more open and scaled, and you've got like the 0-day reports and like all this stuff, is parallel discovery seems to happen all the time. And the reason there's focus on bug classes is not only does parallel discovery happen all the time, but you patch one bug in one component, and it turns out that there's usually 6 or 7 or however many other bugs in that same component. And you have to consider that if a really brilliant researcher, let's say like a Natalie Silvanovich working for the dark side, has spent 6 months learning that one component, she didn't walk out of there with one O day. She walked out of there with 15 fucking O days. And after the first one gets patched, she's going to go leverage the same technique or the same vulnerable component and sell 14 other O days. No shade on Natalie, but like that, she is like the brilliant vulnerability researcher. And if she were working on the dark side, that's what you would see. So there was this Project Zero mentality of like, we not only do we need to address these O days that we find within some timeline, but we also need to address the category of these vulnerabilities, because if somebody is latched on this deep to this thing, they are going to leverage either the same technique in a variety of different areas, or they're going to go deep into the place they've already invested all that energy into and pull out every other bug that you can find. And that is the mentality that puts me in such an adversarial place with Ivanti and Fortinet, and perhaps more so with Microsoft, because in this case with Microsoft, like, they don't have to, it's not like you have to go change the architecture of a CPU and change a fab and change, and wait and try to push a giant recall or
Fix
wait
the
for people
freaking
to
bug.
change.
Just
Like,
fix
it's a
the freaking
fucking
bug.
software bug. Now, I don't know the details of this one, and I know I'm ranting, but like, there are many dimensions to this. Like, I don't know the details of this one, but a problem Microsoft has above all other companies when it comes to software is that their focus on enterprise support makes them the ultimate legacy support company. Maybe not as bad as like an IBM where you're like supporting mainframes at banks that were built 40 fucking years ago, but pretty bad in that it's the reason they've never wanted to address like Kerber roasting, or they had such a hard time with Mimikatz, and they had such a hard time with these like golden ticket techniques and golden SAML and like all this shit where you go, look, Microsoft is sitting there going, yes, kids, I would love to fix this for you, but I have to support 6 different operating systems with 12 different configurations of networking, all of which need to keep working for 30 years before I end of life any one of them, and they need to play with each other at all times. Like, Eternal Blue was an SMBv1 problem, and we were already on SMBv2, but they had to keep that shit going and it had to keep working. You had to enable it because, God forbid, the baby machine runs on Windows XP and it needs to talk to a Windows 11 file server to keep the baby alive. And if you change that one tiny thing, then everything breaks. And yeah, they're more secure, but the baby died, right? Like, and that's enterprise security for you.
Costin, Juanito started his answer by talking about giving vendors benefit of the doubt and having this trust that they're doing the right thing. Do you apply your stance on this disclosure, never going public with exploits or never going public with exploit code, to every vendor, or do you judge based on who you think is a good faith vendor?
No, I think it applies to everybody.
Across the board, you're a non-disclosed guy.
No, not necessarily. I would say first you report it, then you get the CVE, then you get informed, like, we're going to patch this in a month, 2 months, 3 months. And let's say that
when Microsoft says it, a patch will be available in the future, and you as a researcher think that this puts...
You say, okay, guys, we're going to do it like this. We give you 90 days, and we're going to publish it after 90 days.
Oh my
if you patch it or not. That's what I would do.
Oh
and
my
in
God.
90 days, I publish it.
Costin, I have read enough Quarks Lab bulletins, timelines to know how Microsoft dicks these researchers around. Talk to Ivan RC and some of these old school guys. Nothing has changed from... Wait,
I talked to Microsoft. I mean, how I reported like many 0 days to Microsoft. At some point, I was like in the top 100 MSRC 0-day reporters. And I tell you that there were reasonable people. If that situation changed there, I don't know. But to me,
what do you consider? Do you consider Microsoft saying the day before a patch is supposed to be issued, sorry, it didn't make it in, it's going to come in 6 months. And then you wait 6 months and then they say, man, we need 30 more days. And
what I said is, okay, we're going to wait up to 90 days. Like, you have 3 months. And if it's not ready in 3 months, it's not ready.
Okay, so for you, okay, and after 90 days, can I publish exploit code?
I'll tell you a secret. I will never publish the exploit code. I will publish a description like the root cause.
None of that
changes. I'll publish the root cause, like, without details that allow other people to.
So there are no circumstances under which.
Costin is unequivocally right that you do not publish the exploit code.
You're both wrong.
No. The exploit code, the vulnerability description is fair game.
It's fair.
Publishing the exploit code, all these assholes, and I will call all of you assholes, who spend time developing an NDA out of every patch and then putting it on GitHub. Fuck you. Like, how many problems and nightmares this industry has gone through because every imbecile running a shitty low-grade operation
How
now
many-
has access to the latest end day because somebody was nice enough to put it on GitHub for educational purposes.
That is a different thing. That is a different thing.
But that's the same thing.
How many vendors have refused to patch a vulnerability because it's not exploitable? And the only proof I have to show that it's exploitable is to tell the world, here's your proof of concept, here's your exploit code.
If that's the case, if they're saying it's not
This is what Microsoft is doing in this case. They're saying there are all these mitigations in place, blah, blah, blah. This is a low risk thing that nobody should care about. Now, suddenly the guy publishes exploit code and it's a high risk thing. It's like, come on.
Yeah. I'll give you that. I'm just saying, like, that is Microsoft's fault at that point.
But but you can never say never publish exploit code because that's the last. Sometimes that's full disclosure is the last only thing you have. I discussed this in my Echo Party keynote, and I'm glad you brought up the bug bounty thing.
I love
and the
that
fact,
keynote.
Right? My argument there was, listen, you're being dicked around. You've historically been dicked around by these companies. You're being dicked around today. You will be dicked around tomorrow around all this cloud stuff that's coming.
Yeah.
0-day publication and full disclosure sometimes is all we have, and the minute you guys take that away, you have nothing left. That's at a philosophical level how I think about it.
I agree with you. I just don't think, and I don't really, I'm not coming down on this particular scenario at all. Like I think from the sounds of it, the Akamai researcher has something good and has like a real legitimate concern and is being dicked around. However, reading that this is like a managed services type thingamabob, I cannot imagine this is an easy fix. Like, I cannot imagine that in Microsoft land.
And fucking say that.
Yeah. I look, I'm at no point am I going to defend Microsoft. I'm just trying to understand. Like, this isn't one of those where it's like, guys, like, you just needed to change 2 lines of code, and I even told you which ones, and you just don't want to push a patch. Like, fuck you. This is one of those where I am sure somebody sat back and like rubbed their fucking temples for 30 seconds and went, there is no way we're gonna be able to address this due to a series of interdependencies between entirely different clusters of software and services and products here for another like 7 years or something.
Is it possible that this was put into some sort of triaging spreadsheet and the spreadsheet spit out a number that says 9 and the servicing bar is 11 and it just falls below the servicing bar, and in an automated way your triaging system says, moderate service pack, we'll fix in the service pack down the road. It's likely it's possible.
I mean, if it's a service pack, that's still fine. It's because that would be a service pack for one version of software. Like, it's just Windows XP needs to wait till its next big cycle because it's a big architectural change. Okay. But if it's like, we need to change this here and in every other version of the OS and in every version of like the server and domain controller thing and in some kind of like authentication with your cloud AD environment, and then that is a shit show. Like, that's why like Kerber roasting and like all these different types of like Microsoft AD vulnerabilities have been like unfixable forever problems, and people have been talking about them at Black Hat for 10 years. Oh, you get this golden ticket, and then you do this and that, and voila, you're admin, and now you're like across the entire network. Like, everyone's seen one of those talks. We've known about them forever, and Microsoft has known about them and acknowledged them. But like, there's, oh, we'll just push out a patch, and then we look at them and you go, why haven't you pushed it faster? And then there's, we need to architecturally change how different services are going to be able to connect to each other, and then get.
That's all I'm asking. Say
I
that.
understand.
Like, document it properly for me and explain why this delay and why it has to be in a service pack.
I can't believe we do.
I can't believe we did a responsible disclosure debate in 2025 and we got 20 minutes of content out of this shit. By the way, shout out to Akamai. Shout out to the Gordon guy from Akamai. In the absence of an official patch, Akamai has published detection queries, logging guidance, and even a script to locate these kind of principles that can recreate these DMSs that assume that the rights from the old ones. So shout out to Akamai. Disagree with Costin.
I
Hopefully
disagree with you, but
that's fine.
We're still buddies.
Always, buddy.
This
Always,
doesn't
buddy.
met the threshold for us not being buddies anymore.
Absolutely.
It's a 9, and the
The
threshold is
threshold is
11.
11.
I got some breaking news out of Signal Messenger this morning announced that they're adding a new screen security setting designed to block Windows recall from taking screenshots of your Signal on Windows desktop thing. We talked about Windows recall at length. This is the AI thing that takes a screenshot every 5 seconds and put it into this searchable AI fancy schmancy database on Windows AI PCs. Signal is saying, nope. You're not going to be able to screenshot anything on Signal messaging. It's going to bring up this blocker thing.
Valid.
Valid. The bigger issue here is that Microsoft has provided the ability for Signal to do this, but the onus now is on every app to go scramble to put this valid blocker in place for these screenshots. And I expect we'll start to see others follow Signal and kind of implement it within their apps. It's Windows only. It's Windows desktop messenger only, obviously. Costin, you welcome this as a Mac user?
Oh God! So, I mean, instead of fixing the apps, can you just fix Windows? Like, why do you have to fix all the apps? So all the apps that implement some kind of a privacy block so that recall doesn't screenshot. And can we just disable recall at all? Like,
Stop playing with that microphone.
Sorry, I
it's
wanted
not
to fix
me.
the thing.
It's the cat.
That's my fault. No, it's my fault. That's why I'm being in it.
Jeez.
I'm
Sorry, Costin.
distracting from this because Microsoft has sent me a Windows recall device, and now that I'm sponsored, bought, and paid for, I completely disagree with this discussion. No, I feel really bad, and my apologies to Dave Weston, but it took them a while to send me this after our last conversation, and I forgot that I had it. I haven't used it at all. I haven't even set it up yet. So
Send it back and tell them to fix the fucking bugs and they're not fixing.
It's literally like the device enrollment screen.
It can belong before all EDR products have a feature to simply disable recall or block recall or
that's the expectation, right?
Let me hit up my PMs 1 second.
You think I should expect my security software to do that, Costin, in all seriousness?
I think it's coming. I think that hopefully all security solutions will implement a feature to disable recall. Or there'll be like open source tools that you can install to disable recall, or just cancel it, or like get rid of this feature from Windows the same way you can disable telemetry collection, I don't know, inking and typing collection, and all this
it's a weird thing though, because if I remember, if I recall correctly, when we discussed this, when David Weston had the conversation with us at LabsCon last year, Juanito, it is now turned off by default. You have to manually go and turn it on with like proof of presence, biometrics, proof of presence, and some other things, blah, blah, blah. Why are we so worried that it's going to be turned on if it's off by default?
Weston had to take it over. And
correct,
our
they
buddy,
delayed
and he re-architected the whole thing to have the reason they had to ship me a device, and it wasn't just like some feature that I downloaded on a VM, is that it has to connect to this like TPM. It's running on this like particular sort of VM within the hypervisor. It's not accessible from the other things. Like it's not just
Windows
some
Hello
process.
Has to be in place to look at your face to validate things.
It basically has to know that it's you, like literally on there, and there's like an API that connects this VM.
So then there is no risk to have EDR having to turn it off then.
This is me paraphrasing from Weston's implementation. And look, let's assume the implementation is perfect. Let's assume that it is perfect. There is a part of this where it's like, well, maybe I just don't want you to collect it. You know what I mean? Like the idea that I can have something ephemeral and choose for something to be ephemeral in my life and not to be indexed. Maybe I want to be able to have a deeply personal and uncomfortable conversation with my wife without it being indexed and searchable and available for us to once again rehash someday.
For some AI to play with it as well.
Right. And I think that's Signal is acting in our interests in an interesting way. I don't know what change around the deployment of recall is necessitating this, but this was, I believe, your argument, Ryan, of like right now we're saying that this isn't going to affect X, Y, and Z, but we all know that Dave Weston's gonna go on vacation one day, and some PM is gonna
turn it on because he's gonna get a promotion.
exactly, so that he can get a promotion, and then all of a sudden Windows recalls on by default. And considering how hard a time Kostin and I and Silas and everybody else have, for example, trying to turn off Windows Defender, trying to turn off
Same
sample
plus.
submission in our VMs, trying to turn off all this
The
bullshit.
track record
that's like
isn't the track record isn't
the
pretty.
track record's not amazing. And look, there's valid reasons for why you don't want that to be easy and so on, but they could have helped us. Like they could have made it a little easier for researchers. So it's I think it's a valid concern. I think it also speaks to some architectural decisions that macOS has been that Apple has been taking on for a couple of years now, around like entitlements and the idea that the user should get to determine not that the user should get to determine the applicability of system-wide features on an app by app basis, which is like if you're on your iPhone and it asks you like, hey, should this new app you installed be able to check other local devices on your network? Like, that's a feature that's available on your iPhone no matter what. And yes, it may have a legitimate reason to, but you get to choose one time, one prompt, whether you actually want this fucking app to be able to do that. Should it be able to access Bluetooth in order to know what other devices are around? And you go, no, it's a fucking Angry Birds game. Like, why would it need to know the other Bluetooth? Because it's collecting a fuck ton of telemetry and it's stealing and it's selling it somewhere in an ad network. Okay, well, fuck you. No. And that's it. But that entails an architectural sense of entitlements that has been getting pushed by Apple for several years now across different versions with differing levels of success, right? Like, it's not perfect. There's all kinds of like faults to it. People find vulnerabilities in it all the time. It's apparently a fairly easy, well, quote unquote, easy way to like make some bug bounty money. Like even just like being able to disclose like location in some trusted context within iOS will probably net you like, I don't know, $5,000, $50,000, whatever. Like you can go do that. But it's just to say that macOS and iOS are designed with that in mind. And like to your point about triangulation, Spotlight has been available on all of our devices for God knows how long. I have never seen it index a Signal conversation. If I go on here and search something from our 3-buddy problem chat on Spotlight, it doesn't surface anything from Signal.
Thank
So
you.
Yeah,
there
but that's
is
because Apple intelligence sucks and they have no intelligence whatsoever.
it's there, but I can't find it, right? Like, no,
Right.
look, the only bridge, the only
The
fault
magic in
in the
recall is not taking the screenshots. The magic in recall is the recreation of your life that it can do with the AI on the back end, and the ability, the kind of telemetry it gives Microsoft to profile you into like exactly who you are. It's just so fucking frightening to me that why would anyone turn this thing on?
I think the scare. So here's the thing, right? Here's the scary part of it all is I don't think while like we all skewered Microsoft for like who the fuck is asking for this, blah blah blah. But if you were paying attention yesterday or the day before, a video dropped announcing a partnership between Johnny Ive and OpenAI.
The
Which
company
is to
IO,
say,
$6.5 billion for it.
which is
For what?
to
For
build
Johnny Ive.
for Johnny Ive, because I mean he is pretty awesome. But also, like, do you remember Kostin? Well, actually, history, right? Apple history. When Steve Jobs gets ousted, he goes to Next. They build the most beautiful
Yep.
fucking piece of hardware nobody ever bought. And then they get acquired in order to bring essentially the OS, which is the beginning of like modern Mac OS for Apple. There's an interesting similar kind of arc here of like getting the world's greatest product designer, literal designer of all time, to collaborate with OpenAI, a company with Sam Altman. During the Q&A that Dave Vitale arranged for us, like the way he said he like pictured their AI ecosystem is OpenAI is building the OS, the operating system, and other people are meant to build the applications. And that's why OpenAI is not really looking to compete with the folks that are. Can you stop fiddling with these headphones here? We can hear you fiddling. Sorry. I had to get you back, Ryan.
Go.
Sorry.
I want to know when did the AI shilling
No,
start just suddenly?
so the AI
We went from signal to AI shilling in a heartbeat.
Sorry, the AI shilling was actually to say,
Not
OpenAI
AI shilling, but OpenAI shilling specifically.
No. This is not OpenAI shilling. Hear me out.
Gotcha.
OpenAI, as of 2 days ago, started talking about making computers.
Yes, it's a device. It's a physical device.
But
Did
they
you
don't
see the
say what
interview
it
with
is.
Sam Altman and Johnny? Did you see the
Yeah.
interview in the coffee shop?
Yeah,
I didn't
sure.
see the interview. No,
I saw it, yeah.
Because they talked about a physical device that Sam Altman claims that he saw and like his revolutionized
so
his
they're building
brain.
hardware for an AI assistant.
Vaporware bullshit. I call
it.
it.
It had a certain Elizabeth Holmes vibe, if I may say so.
Oh,
that's how I feel.
Johnny Ive gave us the fucking iPod, man. Like, this is not somebody who's never built shit before. Like, this dude is like,
he built Apple headquarters too, right? He designed the Apple headquarters that has birds flying into it.
He
that
brought
has
us
birds.
the chamfered edge, okay? The chamfered edge came from...
So you're all in on this.
Honestly,
Juanito, you're all in on OpenAI
thing.
being a device company?
No, I'm not sorry. Like Toasted. Okay,
one thing I don't need is a shiny silvery thingy that sits on my desk and records everything I'm doing, which is exactly like recall in Windows. I don't need that.
Alone. alone.
Like this is exactly what we don't need.
Bro, you just described every device we use. This is a shiny metal device, partially designed by Johnny Ive,
that
records
not that one that
day.
listens like all the time, listens to what you're saying.
You're wearing an Apple Watch.
It's
recording, it's listening all the time to what you say.
My trust is that the NSA put the software on my Apple Watch that, in addition to the functionality that the watch provides, also provides them with information about what I'm doing. And in this way, they know that I'm not doing anything bad these days. Not that I would be doing anything bad.
This was part of our OPSEC training back in 2014.
Can I read you guys just one line from the Signal blog, which I thought was beautiful? It says, take a screenshot every few seconds legitimately sounds like a suggestion from a low parameter LLM that was given a prompt like, how do I add an arbitrary AI feature to my operating system as quickly as possible in order to make investors happy?
Wow.
But more sophisticated threats are on the horizon.
Wow.
We are just so headlong jumping into this AI world in a way where we're not thinking about the privacy implications. I mean, it's just startling to me.
Look, guys, I was trying to get at something a little different with the recall thing, right? Like, we all skewered Microsoft for recall, and honestly, that was really the first time it clicked for me. And I feel really ignorant saying this, but it was the first time it clicked for me that Apple had already been doing this for us on device, right? With Spotlight, with
not the screenshotting part, not the screenshotting part, the indexing part.
Wait, but it's not just indexing. They are running ML locally on your device to describe your pictures and make them searchable. They are running ML locally on your device to do all kinds of post-processing, categorization, etc., that makes it searchable and indexing that. Now, note what I just said.
It works fantastic.
It works
you can
really
go
well.
say dog August summertime in the mountains, and you'll get all your own photos. Yeah.
Now, note how I described that sentence. I said they are running ML locally on your device, and that's why Apple will always get our kudos and continues to get our money, even though they've been fucking up a lot lately. Because to them, there is a priority to having this be on device, to the point where Apple Intelligence is a piece of shit. But it's a piece of shit because they're trying to make it work with models that you can run on your device. And it's almost right now, it's relatively impossible to get the levels of performance that we're getting used to with LLMs, with large language models that run on fucking insane GPU clusters somewhere with the same hardware that you have for your phone in an efficient, memory efficient, hardware efficient, power efficient, heat efficient way. It's just not possible. So they're trying to figure out how the fuck to do that. And we should stand them. Like we should want Apple to win. I am not about to give them any fucking credit along the way when they're pushing really shitty versions of things, but we should want them to win. Now, the reason I brought OpenAI and the Johnny Ive thing is that you're seeing why Microsoft thought to make Recall, which is the vision that Sam Altman has for OpenAI as the OS of AIs is providing people with a life companion style artificial intelligence that has access to all of the information of your life, all of your conversations, all of your pictures, all of your calendars, all of your blah blah
Who's
blah,
asking for this?
it knows you so well that it will know to personalize things and take actions on your behalf and make decisions on your behalf and provide you with relevant information without you even asking, because it has this massive agglomeration of information, access to all these different things, access to all your different services, identities, passwords, passkeys, etc., whatever the fuck it is. And it can do that in a really informed fashion because it has access to that. And that requires a certain amount of insane levels of information codification, because it's not just whether you're giving them access to your Google Drive. You never sat there and wrote, I am a well-educated person with this background and this is what I like, and on Tuesdays I feel like eating yogurt in the morning, but then on Thursdays I prefer eggs. Like, nobody's sitting there writing this captain's log of who they are and what they do and everything they want to do. So you somehow need to be codifying all of this information about people
By spying
and
on them.
by helping them spy on themselves.
Why?
It's so that it's
Who's
available.
asking for this shit,
Why
Costin?
exactly?
There's a vision of the future. I wrote almost 5,000 words about this on the way back from PivotCon. I was writing a paper about Westworld season 3 and 4 and what it tells us about what the vision is for AI in the future. And then I never published it because I felt silly.
I segment people by if they made it past season 2 of Westworld or if they didn't.
You can know a human being to their core, whether they made it past season 2 of Westworld into 3 and 4 or not, which is also why I haven't published it.
I didn't.
Yeah.
And the people who made it, they are publishing 5,000 word papers.
And we're still buddies. You know, it's a 9, the threshold is 11, we're still buddies.
So you believe, Juanito, you genuinely believe that there's a future where people need this. They don't know that they need it yet. Costin and I don't know that we need it yet, but we will need it.
So I think that I'm about to, let me say something completely asinine. Let me just be careless in how I speak, please. I think that there is
Hold on, let me check the timestamp.
vision. There is a vision of the world where we are suffering from our success in scaling technology over the past 25 years or so on, where what we have enabled is terminal accelerationism. Everything in our lives now relies on such an amount of automation that it is running at a speed that we as human beings cannot ever match or wield or appropriately manage, because our brains, our throughput has not changed.
Give me an example. Give me a real world example of one of these things.
I mean, look at just trying to keep up with our careers, like just trying to keep up with the volume of information that is released about AI, about cybersecurity, the amount of hacks that we do, like the amount of breaches, the amount of
APT
IOC,
tracking,
the amount
it's like
APT tracking. That so right when I started in this industry, which I came at it much later than the two of you, I had to keep up with like I don't know, 70 Twitter accounts and 20 different blogs, and I had time to learn how to reverse engineer on my off time and somehow become competent enough and even get to play in the big leagues with people just a few years after. Doing that shit today is impossible. You could pick a deeper subset of it, but the notion that you could have a view of everything that's coming out in this field and somehow be aware of all the technology and somehow process
It's
all of the
impossible.
samples that
It's
are it's like,
impossible with the tools you had then.
yeah, it's
Your
and it's
argument is that
impossible.
today you can't possibly survive without embracing the AI tools that are allowing you to do this automation and 10xing your output.
Yeah, my futurist, my semi-futuristic picture that I'm trying to put out here is simply that everything we've been doing up until 2 to 3 years ago has been an ever increasing ramp up of automation and its effects on human life have been effectively to create a sense of terminal accelerationism where it feels impossible because it is impossible to keep up with everything that is relevant to us as human beings. We just discussed our careers and you said, oh my God, it's impossible to do X. That's just your career. What about your personal life? What about your extended circle of friends, which are now a global empire of people, all of whom are communicating and generating content on 17 different platforms at all given times? I have 12,000 unread signal messages right now. I have 3,500 of them were just from a community that we created in LabsCon, and I cannot keep up with. That is without my meetings, my Zoom calls. I have a PA and partial access to an EA, and I can't keep track of my own fucking calendar. Like, it's
You
just
need to
a
slow
level.
down, brother. You're just going too fast, right, Costin? Slow down. Go to the
guys,
gym. Get some
Can I
taekwondo.
ask
You think I have
simple
time to go to the
question?
gym? Like,
Here's a simple question. How can a shiny round device sitting on your
Fix all of that
desk
shit for me.
fix all that shit? It can't. And what
no,
can
no,
a round shiny device sitting on your desk do better than an app running on your laptop or your phone?
So my point here is not to defend what is in the immediate future, but to describe that in the medium term future, what AI stands to be is the great leveler, the change in evaluative throughput that a human being has access to in order to handle that accelerationism. When I can go to sleep and know that while I'm sleeping, something that accurately represents my goals, my intentions, has access to my information, my credit cards, my APIs to everything that I use, is scheduling my anniversary dinner, booking my tickets for my vacation. When I wake up, it will have sorted my calendar so that I actually only have the right number of calls. It answered 40% of the emails I had because they were all bullshit, yes, no, blah, blah things I didn't need to look at. It's effectively democratizing the personal assistant. And that's something that I have access to that has changed my life
Are you comfortable outsourcing
that
it?
99% people do not have access to.
Are you comfortable outsourcing that super critical part of everything you're being to a private venture-backed company that that is built on?
That's where you're getting into the parts of this that are deeply uncomfortable. I'm not arguing that I am dying to give OpenAI the fabric of my life and give them all my information and depend on them to coddle and baby me through life. I'm not saying that I'm dying to do that. I'm saying that for the sake of understanding what is motivating these bajillion-dollar companies to say that this is what they need to do, even
That's their
against
hypothesis,
public
is that
and
everyone will want that.
massive outcry, push them not to kill it, but to put one of the smartest people in their company full time to re-engineer it and still push it. Because there is this vision. Had you watched Westworld season 3 and 4, you would
Never made
understand
it. I'm the other
that
side of the coin.
no, that this is essentially the only way to be the 21st century human we always imagine. And look, man, any retro futuristic vision of what the 21st century was going to look like always included some AI assistant, blah blah blah. Tony Stark didn't sit there and manually build the Iron Man suit. It had this disembodied magical voice that was commanding a factory and clearing his schedule and waking him up in the mornings. And
This
and I and
dependence.
bro, just one last bit
What
on
you're
that.
saying, Juan,
What?
what you're saying is that what they need is Scarlett Johansson, not Johnny Ive. This is what you're saying.
Well, they cloned Scarlett Johansson without paying her, and now they can just get Johnny Ive. It's just,
Look,
and I'm
that's a
sure Johnny Ive
reality.
better be careful because they're training a model that designs devices with chamfered edges and narrates videos with his voice. And like Johnny Ive will not have any utility by the end of this. It will be sucked out of him and
Juanito,
distilled into a model.
Juanito, this dependence on private companies is something that's it's on the list here. I just was looking at the list of things we wanted to talk about today, and there's a story here that in February the U.S. imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court in The Hague, right? And
Wait, what just happened?
This is the best. This is so fucking funny. I'm
no,
sorry.
in all seriousness,
I'm sorry.
I want to tee up this story. The U.S. imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court in The Hague, and as a result of this, the chief prosecutor has no access to his emails on his Microsoft account. Why is this so funny to you? This is the dependence I'm talking about, that you're throwing all of this in the hands of Sam and Johnny Ive to have this device that takes control of your life, and then you cede all of this to them. The issue here, again, the risk of dependence on IT services, US IT services in this case, but just generally, can you talk a little bit about this dependence and how it affects things when politics and geopolitics gets thrown in? Why did you laugh at this story?
Well, I laughed at the story for an entirely different reason, which is that I was there at the ICC when Microsoft and the ICC were consummating their union, and I saw Kareem sitting next to Tom Burt, and they were practically holding hands, like it's to this wonderful alliance. Like, dude, literally, like,
Kareem
it's
is the
just
chief prosecutor who is blocked right there.
yeah. Well, yeah. For now, he's under some pretty hot scrutiny for entirely different for entirely different reasons. But yeah, go Google that story. But it's hilarious to me because it was such obvious capture, and I was there. Like, I remember Lindsay Freeman and I looked at each other and like we're like, this is insane. Like, Microsoft is hosting an event at the International Criminal Court. Like, there's regulatory capture, and then there's just like, do they rent it? Like, do they own the space? Like, can we book other events? Can we have, like, is Tom Burt gonna have his wedding at the ICC? Like, what the fuck is this, right? Like, so much, there's not even like a semblance of like independence. And then to see it all kind of like foot gun,
Explode.
right? Like, to just watch it like blow up in their faces. It's like, you're like, okay, sorry, cool, bro. Like, the fuck. But
Costin?
sorry, you have a broader point.
The broader point is on dependence on private intelligence.
Yeah,
I bring
this
this
is a
up.
really clever segue. This is a brilliant segue that you just, because you're correct. And the part, look, that's why I said, let me speak recklessly. Let me just say what I think needs to be said as the argument that I see, like the discussion I see on behalf of these people who are making decisions, right? Like, it's not that they're completely irrational and just building shit out of nowhere. This is coming from a concerted vision of what's coming in the world. And what we need to, there's a reason I keep telling everybody, Apple sucks right now, but you should support them, because they're the only company that continues to try to figure out how to put enough power in your hardware and enough of like logic and requirements to
They'll hand off a lot of it to the cloud, though. I mean, there's going to be a lot of the resources. The ones that are useful, the real useful ones will be handed off.
even that, like, they didn't just say, well, sorry, I guess we
Fair.
can't do this. So here's an API call, and now OpenAI knows everything you do. They built all this bullshit hardware and all this obfuscating infrastructure and, you know,
This
private
private
cloud
compute thing, right? Yeah.
So I'm saying, like, Apple might suck right now, and, like, honestly, they keep fucking up Bluetooth devices. They keep breaking the AirPods Pro. Apple Intelligence is fucking terrible, and yet
Let's go buy
we
some new
should
Or the
devices.
we should
glasses.
support them. Oh
Or
God, it's you
please.
want them? They're fucking like you look like a bee.
What, the
and it
Vision
has,
Pro
like,
thing?
The Vision
yeah,
Pro.
it just
Oh, you have one of those too? I told you, this
yeah,
guy's way
fucking-
ahead of us, Costin. He's
bought-
running
I
too
don't have
I
fast.
bought it.
no.
I bought it for my birthday. The
There you
silly
go.
shit. I should have given it to Martin before he moved to Switzerland.
And you got a big
regret
battery
that.
pack on your nose.
Yeah, you gotta. So this, I will be walking in Apple's future. I'm walking around with this like battery pack strapped to
Costin.
my hip, looking like a fucking bee. You know, wearing this and this shit in the most uncanny way shows you like a pair of eyes. So it's like and they're not your eyes. It's like this weird, like it's the fucking most bizarre shit ever. And
If you're
everyone
not
was like,
watching
yeah,
us on
that's cool.
YouTube, if you're
This
not
is-
watching us on
You
YouTube,
have-
Juan is demonstrating his Vision
bee.
Pro.
Oh wait, I haven't plugged the battery pack in. Forgive me. One
Plug
second.
it.
Like, what was
Costin,
I thinking?
Costin, you promised me a small, tiny, shiny box. This guy's running around with a battery pack on his head.
Look,
Well,
that's what I've seen on the internet, like the Johnny Ive
It broke. No,
Westworld spy device, like sitting on your desk. The moment I saw it, gave me the creeps. It looked exactly like the evil
Juanito looked like
devices
he's
that
going
you
up
see in the
Whistler
movies.
Mountain for a ski session.
Yeah, yeah. I'm hoping
Any
you'll
moment
see
now,
some-
guys. Any
Yeah,
moment.
it's loading up.
Any moment.
Yeah, this is normal. This is absolutely what the future is going to look like. People will have conversations like this, and you know, sounds fucking
You're gonna
great.
talk to your girlfriend or wife wearing
Yeah,
these
well,
things?
Not only will you it doesn't think about it, right? It has no camera view wherein you can have a
You gotta
A-
see him. You gotta see
a
him clicking
vision
his
of
fingers.
yourself. Where you can actually see yourself, right? Like so when you're calling your wife, it thinks it's completely fucking normal to show her like a disembodied Pixar 3D version of yourself talking to her as if that's what human beings do. It's not, in case anybody is listening, right?
Where's the
anyone's
eyes?
gonna-
We wanna see the bee eyes.
I need to set him up. Like I need to like have it
He'll
record my
spend,
face.
he'll spend half an hour having to
I'll
set
spend
it
the
up. We
rest
gotta
of the
move on with.
episode
Look, I
Yeah.
have a feeling
No.
that everybody wants to overcomplicate things and like shiny
Yeah.
devices and helmets, when in reality, what people want, I tell you what people want, would be
Tell us,
a cat that you can talk to, and the cat that reads blog posts when you're sleeping and can summarize all the latest threat intelligence news when you wake up in the morning. When you do an omelet, the cat just tells you what's new, like all the
Yeah.
things that you missed. You don't
The
need
point you're
Johnny
making.
Ive
The
for
point you're
that.
making is
You
that there's
just
a
need the
bunch of
cat.
useful. The point you're making is that there's a bunch of useful use cases that doesn't
Oh, yeah.
require somebody listening to
What-
everything you do and putting you in these
Correct.
uncomfortable privacy complications, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And the other thing which I think it's important, that whatever technology must look like in the future, it needs to look human, not a scary, cold, silvery device spying
Yeah.
on you sitting on your desk, but a cat
Well-
that walks around, hugs you, whatever, and tells you what's new.
All you're asking for is like the anthropomorphic, warm and fuzzy side of this, and I know you're
With
right.
Scarlett
but you're gonna
Johansson's
be
voice.
you're gonna. Well, I'm sorry, Blade Runner 2049, right? Like the fucking
Correct,
disembodied
exactly.
girlfriend 3D thing.
I
If it
thought
looks
that
like Ana
was
de
the
Armas,
most
then
realistic.
here, take,
Yeah.
yeah. But
But do you
look,
need Johnny
look
Ive
at-
for that?
Look at the well, you'll need Johnny Ive for the fancy rich person version of that. What you see in Blade Runner 2049 and what you see in shows like Altered Carbon and all the sci-fi is that's usually dystopic because you're not seeing what the richest 1% of a hyper futuristic universe looks like. You're seeing what the trickle down version of that for the plebs and this like the completely disenfranchised masses looks like, including Star Wars. The whole point of like the Star Wars universe is like you're in the outer edges and you're seeing people who have this like what clearly is very advanced technology living in like a fucking desert in some shithole planet somewhere that nobody cares about, but they have enough autonomy with robots and stuff and AI of some sort that they can survive. And that's like this that is the most like sci-fi bullshit version of what we're discussing here, in that what we're now talking about is an asymmetrical increase in autonomy and the ability to function and do more by yourself. However, Ryan's point is extremely valid. At this time, what we have gotten with the transition from mega tech corporations to basically mega ad corporations to mega cloud corporations, and in this like techno-feudalistic version of the world is one where we all have to rent our way to that future. And that is where it gets kind of terrifying, because in the Apple world, they weren't sorry, in the Star Wars world, they hopefully were not having to spend galactic credits so that the AI continues to work until the fields or they starve. And that is the future that we are setting up in the immediacy, which is I can function as a human being at top speed and top capability as long as I can pay Sam Altman $20,000 a month. And the minute that I can't,
Yeah,
I am
your
just as
intelligence
fucked
drops.
as everybody else.
Thank you.
And it's scary like that. No, I agree with you, Ryan. I agree completely. Moreover, the reason I wrote all that shit about Westworld that nobody has to read is that there are further implications about this notion of codifying what the human being is in some electronic fashion. Cambridge Analytica and Facebook crisis of 2016 so on was about the fact that it turns out that if you get enough psychometric data about a human being through their casual interactions with technology, you get a pretty horrifyingly accurate perception of who they are and what they need. And apparently it's okay to do that when you want to sell fucking, I don't know, baby toys to somebody that hasn't even realized they're pregnant yet. Okay, but cool. It's scary when you then consider what those companies are willing to do and what they're willing to be party to. Facebook was perfectly okay with being party to a couple of casual genocides. Like it happens, right? So what are they doing with that X-ray of who you are that we're not ready to accept as human beings? We're not ready to accept that enough of those stupid quizzes and enough views of how you click on things actually let somebody codify a pretty good profile of who you are and what you choose. And that was Shoshana Zuboff's point in The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. We've broken capitalism because there's no such thing as the invisible hand when a company not only can preempt what you like, but also redirect you to things you didn't know you wanted. Because in fact, you did not want them until they
Told you that you
made you
needed
want them. So, very weird world. Anyways, let's talk about cyber.
Good
Some,
luck in
some
your.
would even argue that we no longer live in capitalism, but what we live is techno-feudalism.
As Yanis Varoufakis very astutely has said. And he especially focuses on cloud capital. You have built this notion of cloud capital where people are you need to read the book. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, I'm not
it's
saying that
worth. It's
I'm not
worth.
I'm not saying it's totally accurate, but there is a really important point here, and you can't just dismiss it as Europeans being sort of communisty. Like you need to like actually engage with this discussion because it is like we're hearing that from the outer rim. We're hearing that from Europe, but that shit is being built in America.
They are sort of,
Techno-feudalism is American, right?
In
they
the
are sort of
meantime,
communism.
They love that shit.
Prosecutor Khan moved to ProtonMail, a Swiss email provider. Like we can of course talk about all these fancy features, but when we come down to earth, he had to switch to ProtonMail, which to me I think it's a very powerful lesson. Like of course everything's fine until things are not fine anymore.
I have so many things to say about that, but I think we
We're
should
way past the
probably
2 hour mark, and I just got one small story I wanted to touch on, maybe
Only
not for too
one.
long.
Only one.
just one.
Japan actually
Japan.
passed a law,
Ah,
a new active defense law, cyber defense law that allows for offensive cyber operations. Right in your wheelhouse, Juanito. Release the guardrails. This law explicitly allows law enforcement agencies to infiltrate and neutralize hostile servers before any malicious activity has taken place, and do so below the level of an armed attack and so on. This is Japan actually codifying its ability to do quote unquote offensive operations, hack back in the
preemptively. It's like defend forward.
Defend forward. Something you welcome, something you expect to see some motion here. Is this something that is a precursor to what we'll see around the world? What do you think?
I am really in. First of all, fucking dope, Japan. Like I think it's cool. I'm dying to go to Japan this year and kind of like. Well, anyways, I hope to have a good excuse to go to Japan this year. I'm really excited about this, mostly because if the Japanese can argue that this is a valid projection of quote unquote cyber power, a nation that literally has like a pacifism
Constitution,
core
yeah.
tenet in their constitution, I think what you're seeing is a parsing out away from the bullshit militarism and militarization of cyber as a domain, which is, as a domain, even calling it a domain is a militaristic term for something.
First time I heard that, it was who was it, Costin?
Hayden.
Matthew Hayden at our
Michael
event when he said we are number one. That was the first time I had heard him kind of segment it as a domain, and I realized this was how the military was looking at it.
Yeah, there is a really interesting master's thesis by a gentleman, Craig Weiner, who talks about the fact that, like, oh god, we've gone for so long on this podcast, my headphones just died. He's talked about the fact that the rise of CNO, of computer network operations, it was not, for once, it was not a major military innovation. It's an innovation bred from the intelligence community. And it means that, like, we have not known kind of how to categorize it, how to inject it into how things work in our government and so on. So the way that it was done in the early 90s was for existing organizations to find ways to essentially finesse the language into making cyber fit into the existing power structures. So NSA wanting to keep cyber for themselves and not letting, let's say, CIA or whomever else take it, they said, well, our remit is about signals intelligence. Then cyber is about collecting signals at rest. And you're like, what? It's like, yeah, signals at rest, bro. Obviously, that's what that is. And you go, what the fuck are you people smoking? But like, it's about essentially finding a way to fit it into the existing things. So for the military side of things, because a lot of this started with the Air Force and so on, is like, well, cyber is another domain. It's the air. What is it? Land, sea, air, space, cyber. And that's what Hayden says, right? Like he puts his hand up, he goes, what?
Yeah,
and so cyber is a domain, which means that's why you get cyber command, and that's why you get the Air Force, the same way the Navy has planes, because it has to be able to defend itself and so on in these correlated domains. Then you also have to have cyber. The problem with that is, okay, that got you through the bureaucracy of the 90s into the 2000s and people kind of embracing this brand new thing. But it actually has warped our ability to properly describe cyber in a way that makes any fucking sense. And that's actually an argument I made in SummerCon. I spoke at SummerCon 2 years ago, and had this kind of like drunken rant against the whole like cyber power index that the Harvard Belfer Center had put out, because cyber power is a nonsensical corollary of thinking about cyber as a military domain. It makes no fucking sense. Cyber power, first of all, how can you have an objective metric of cyber power when cyber power is a relative measure? We have great cyber power as a country. Okay. And when you go fight a nation that is entirely undeveloped, how much cyber power does the US have? How,
there is no cybering to do, right?
Exactly. So then you actually have no cyber power. It is a relative measure. So that was part of my argument there, is just to come back to this notion of like, we have over militarized it for the sake of bureaucracy. And in effect, we have somehow bureaucratized cyber. And a nation like Japan that has a fundamental tenet for pacifism, basically saying, fuck off with that. We need to defend ourselves in cyber, and it is not a way of militarizing cyberspace. It's just some common sense measures for the sake of defending yourself. I think is a great exercise. I want them to succeed. My thing here is going to be, what do they do with it? And because the biggest problem that you'd get is not that they use it poorly or that they use it effectively, but that they don't use it at all. And that's what we keep seeing with all this shit. At the end of the day, what ends up winning is doing nothing. And like, we're spending billions on cyber capabilities that we don't use. And they just rot on the shelf.
How is this different, neutralizing hostile servers and like the kind of things they describe here, different from what the Lumen and FBI and Microsoft does with all these takedowns and these neutralizing of servers and sinkholing servers and so on? This this suggests that there's more. This suggests that the Japanese are clearing the way to do more than that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because first of all, the important difference is that it's the government doing it. A. B, that they can do the kind of things that we were discussing earlier, where you go, well, we don't own this infrastructure. It's vulnerable. We're going to hack it. Boom, done. Right? Like what we were talking about with the event, where I joke that somebody should do bricker bot their way through all these vulnerable appliances. Obviously, nobody wants that. That's not an actual desirable outcome. But
he was joking. I didn't want like some people clips that and have Juanito calling for the bricking.
Look, if I call for the bricking and then somebody does some bricking, the idea that I did the bricking is beyond us. I think if you think that I'm more responsible for all those devices getting bricked than the people who could have kept them from getting bricked, you have a fucking problem. A variety of problems, and they have to do with the bureaucratization of cyber that we're discussing right now. Again, protect the babies, careful with the respirators. Oh my God, what if you restart that router for 15 minutes? Is an extension of this notion that like we treat it as if somebody leveraging an exploit and turning off a device is the same as like a JDAM being dropped on a building, and those two things are just not comparable by any normal stretch of the imagination.
Costin, take the last word on this story. Does this give you
I think you're looking at very nice people, the Japanese, through the eye of the mighty American ego, and thinking that they might be doing or approaching things in a very American way, which in reality I think it's not the situation here. Drawing a parallel between the Japanese and Romania, because I like that. Romania was being infiltrated by Russian drones over and over, and the Romanian army couldn't do a thing because there wasn't any law which allowed them to shoot down unmanned aerial vehicles like drones, unless it's a time of war. So in a time of peace, we have to let them fly. And the Russian drones were just flying valiantly and happily through the Romanian airspace. Unless, of course, there was a law, and they did actually vote a law which now allows the Romanian military to shoot them down. And I think the Japanese pretty much approach things in the same way. They want to do everything by the book. So they need, first of all, they need a law which gives law enforcement agencies the right to neutralize these servers. How do they neutralize them? Well, of course, I guess that depends on a case-by-case basis. But in my experience, they've already dealt with cases when they had the means to neutralize the servers through an exploit or whatever. However, the legal part was missing. So I think that the Japanese are just trying to essentially fix this legal issue so they can actually take care of the problem and stop the malicious cyber servers fly through their cyberspace unattended and just shoot them down.
You see the problem with the militarization thing? It's not their cyberspace. It's just one giant miasma of servers. It's not just shooting them down because you what does that mean, right? Like, what if the malicious servers are being hosted by Microsoft on Azure in an American data center with an IP that comes out of Bulgaria, but you are in Romania and you are being attacked by this traffic, but that traffic's actually being amplified through a Cloudflare server, which is this miasma thing of like everywhere it's connected, because the physics of this shit just don't fucking work that way, and none of this stuff makes any sense. But also because somehow you can't compel the people who own the infrastructure to enforce stuff. Like that Luma Stealer story, it's like, oh, that's cool. Thank you guys for like doing this takedown. But also, like, why does any of this work this way? Right? Like, why? Like, we have to pat ourselves on the back because a few like private sector companies like decided to do a thing, and I'm grateful to them that they did it, but it does not make any sense that this is the way that it has to happen. And it's this bizarre overextension of the idea of like geospatiality to cyber, of the idea of like ownership and rentiership and responsibility, regency over your cloud capital in cyber. If there's somebody running a malicious server that's attacking other people on Azure, why do we have no recourse to tell Microsoft to turn that shit off or redirect it? Or how about you go grab all the malicious stuff that they put in there and tell us what other servers these people bought and how they bought them, and we actually do something about this. But like, Microsoft can do it. Microsoft will do it if they feel like it. And when they don't feel like it, they don't feel like it. And you go, well, we're fucked.
Shout out to the Japanese for doing it by the book and not having a free-for-all. That I've always been warned.
Let's see if they can do it. I hope they do it. I want to go there and congratulate them myself.
Quickly, Costin, let's close the show with some shout-outs. It's been 2 hours and 16 minutes. Pretty long episode. All the long episode people, you're happy.
Man.
The long episode people are happy. Let's close the show. Quickly, Costin, what do you have?
I was thinking we need to start how is it called, a curse jar, like whenever you drop a penny, whenever you say, but we do it like, we call it an Ivanti jar. So whenever we say Ivanti, we drop a penny in the jar. Yeah. We're gonna do that for the next episode.
Ryan, how can you close this shit out? I'm
can.
sorry, Kostin.
No,
but like without covering the fucking Project Raven Redux story.
And Careto?
Like with that,
no Careto?
I have like 10 other things on the list. We're at 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Let's do
3-hour episode, man.
Like lightning talks. 15 seconds.
We'll get to it next week.
15 seconds for the Project Raven. 15 seconds.
15 seconds. Let's touch this UAE thing quickly. Kim Zeta wrote a story on her zeroday.com, zeta-zeroday.com website that former workers of the DoD, Department of Defense Digital Service, blah, blah, blah. Some folks who resigned from the DoD post
DDS.
Post Doge as a response to Doge and the Department of Government efficiency efforts are now being recruited by United Arab Emirates folks to work on AI for their military. You mentioned Project Raven Redux, which was a previous episode where the Israelis were recruiting Americans to go do some offensive security operations there. What is the significance of what Kim wrote about here? Why do you want to talk about this story?
First of all, because it's fucking hilarious on a variety of levels. Second of all, because my understanding is that the DDS people are actually really talented. Like they are actually people that you will regret not having. Yeah, like this is not just like, oh, some random IT dudes that you can just kind of cycle through.
So there's a real story here that there's a bunch of really, really talented people who are no longer with the U.S. government because of Doge, and now they're in play. And there's some international folks.
Not only are they in play, but then some, mysterious person from the UAE shows like quite front-facingly reaches out to the department, basically being like, can we get contact with these people that just left? And then go and offer all 30 of them a job in the UAE.
We're best friends with the UAE now, though, right?
Sure, except the reason I said Project Raven 2.0 is the subtle subtext, the not so subtle subtext of how this is being described is that the concern is that this is basically for G42.
Like G42 is this United Arab Emirates company that's been kind of mentioned in some Senate papers and some papers around alleged work with China's government and intelligence service. So there's like some complications there. Help me understand what Kim is reporting.
Well, there's some complications there in that there's a lot of discussion about G42 being involved in some not amazing things like the Totalk chat app surveillance thingamabob, and the fact that the CEO was previously running Dark Matter's, supposedly, allegedly, Dark Matter's Pegasus unit. And so there's all that. I would like to also remind folks here that as of last year, thanks to $1 billion investment, Brad Smith sits on the board of G42, if I remember correctly.
Really?
I believe so. Which is part of the discussion of like, were we bringing them into the fold, or is Microsoft just happily playing whatever side it wants on this?
Interesting.
And to then see this, like, the reason I brought up Project Raven is not to stigmatize the CEO himself, but to say, like, this sounds really fucking familiar. Like, this already happened in the UAE where you had a unit of people with, like, Cyberpoint with a legitimate contract to help them set up this, like counterterrorism unit in the UAE that turned into a infamous hacking unit, brilliantly reported by the Reuters guys, that we are told was turned against Americans and other folks, right? Like, so it isn't like just a casual, haha, well, I guess we lost some talent. They're going to go work and like have a great time out in the Emirates, which I'm sure they would.
But don't these shouldn't these folks have the option to go work wherever they want to work? Like, why?
Sure. Why did you fire them? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I'm not saying that, I'm not faulting the folks that may choose to take these jobs, though. Let's
That's what we did with Project Raven, though.
Well,
we kind of demonized those folks.
Well, no. The Raven thing is interesting, and it's an important nuance worth discussing here.
15
there
seconds.
Was
I know. That's why I didn't want to start this. I knew this would go down a path.
Oh, right. You want to just cut it? Like,
no. Go. We're all in now.
Fine. Fuck it. Yeah, fuck it. Let's just leave it for the next one.
No, we're invested. I'm invested now. You can't do that.
Now you want? All right.
Give me the 10-minute version. Let's close in 10 minutes.
1 minute.
We'll do it live. So the interesting thing on the Project Raven side is actually the dynamics of how this comes about. And it's why this is not that dissimilar right now. Though, admittedly, we don't know that these people are going to go to the UAE and be doing nefarious things. Let's not malign them, right? But what's similar is there was a contract to do a thing in the UAE that was approved by the State Department, and they were supposed to be helping the folks there learn to do this CT stuff. But admittedly, the Americans were not supposed to be running the ops. They were just supposed to be supporting their counterparts in the UAE, training them, etc. And then out of nowhere, that contract, for whatever reason, gets canceled. And the Americans that had been supporting get offered these like spectacular
Practitioner
jobs.
roles. Yeah.
And then where the big difference is, they're no longer tethered by American, at least in their thinking, the American laws and the American guidance is what they could and could not do. And that turns into this Project Raven thing where now you're hacking whomever, right? You're hacking iOS devices, and like there's implications that allegedly Americans were hit in that process and so on. So that's what makes it turn so kind of nefarious. But note that the people who turned to go work for Project Raven can claim that they did not know that this was not allowed, did not know that this was not appropriate. The people who take this job now,
you hear AI and military. Yeah.
Well, you're in a post-Raven world, so I'm curious how many people accepted the offer. And some of those people, I mean, look, you just took their fucking jobs away. Maybe they don't feel like they have much of a choice. And that's not to say that they're going to show up there and break the law immediately or anything like that. But it's also in a much harder situation where they have to admit, well, there is a history of this turning into some kind of wrongdoing that will be prosecuted by the FBI at some point. So what do you do? Right?
This is your guidance to those folks to avoid that?
My guidance to these folks is just to be really fucking clear on what they want to be doing and where their lines are, and when they choose to walk away. And frankly, if you have to surrender your passport to be there,
red flag.
I mean, that's not a red flag. That is a human trafficking adjacent. So like fucking figure out what the fuck you're doing with your lives. Like that's all I'm saying.
Costin, you got a thought on this? Have you been tracking and following?
Maybe you can ask Brad Smith what they should do.
Brad Smith.
I'm not buddies with Brad Smith, so I can't ask him personally. I have a lot of thoughts, but I think we're out of time. So why don't we just continue this story at the next time? Because again, what's the most valuable thing in a story, in my opinion? IOX. And there's no IOX yet.
No IOX, no story.
When there's IOX, let's go back and revisit it.
Do you have any shout-outs or plugs or hellos for anyone?
Shout-outs to our good friend Florian Roth for calling out things for what they are. I know. Shout-outs to my good friend Alexander from the UAE, where he works for a very legitimate company, not this kind of other things that we've been talking about. And of course, to all the people we've seen recently at conferences. I know this week was the week of BotConf. Unfortunately, I couldn't go there. But shout outs to all our former colleagues who are there having fun. I hope they're enjoying, and hope to see them maybe another year, next year.
Just from my side, as a counter to Costin, shout out to Yuval Gordon for holding the fort. Holding the fort and keeping these people honest. Juanito, you close the show quickly with some last words.
Okay. So first of all, and you're going to hear me ad nauseum on this for the next few weeks. So just saddle up, people. The LabsCon CFP is open. Now's the time to send us some dope shit.
Closes on June 23rd.
I do not want to hear from you on June 25th telling me what an awesome talk you had and you wish you had submitted it.
We're pretty strict with deadline too, so.
Yeah, we have to be, because also, anyways, we have to be.
Your AI, you see? I told you.
This fucking Windows device is now like insisting to be just, okay.
It's listening to him.
It was listening all along.
All along. It has thoughts. It didn't like me talking about Brad Smith. So also folks who reached out for sponsorship after the last podcast, thank you so much. And anybody else who's interested, like now's the time. Obviously, we'd love to have the support. There's a lot of people kind of going through some harsh economic headwinds. So we definitely welcome it to keep the conference the way that it's been. And thanks to all the folks who are already sort of supporting us. yeah, CFP is open. Invites have already gone out to alumni. Invites will go out to folks that are starting to request as of, I believe, 10 days from now, less, probably a week from now. Beyond that, shout out to my friends in the AI Sommelier Society. We will be having our monthly meeting this Sunday, which should be a fairly interesting time.
Drinking wine and chilling OpenAI shit.
Just talking shit. You know I don't drink wine, but I will be talking shit about
You said
AI
sommelier.
stuff.
I thought you would have like a wine.
Well,
wine.
we're experts for models, bro. You have to taste like the fruity, earthy tones of O3.
Costin, make it stop, please.
No,
will Johnny Ive be present?
I mean, one can only wish. He would be offended by the poor aesthetics of my place. But
I want to add one thing to your LabsCon thing. Wait before you go on. I wanted to give a shout out from the sponsorship side that you mentioned to the folks at Framework who donated the laptops for our best speaker prizes. Those amazing laptops. They've committed to doing it again. Shout out to Framework. Those guys are amazing. Cisco Talos and Luta Security. You mentioned Katie Masur's Luta Security, and those guys have all been big supporters of ours. And I think it's important to mention and tag them.
No, we're thrilled to have everybody back, and hopefully to expand that circle. The last shout out is my way of kind of sneaking a story here in a way, but shout out to our friends at the NSC, Alexei, JD, and who I'm not saying they were involved in this, but whoever at the National Security Council heard that NSO was coming to town to ask them to get removed from the entity list and told them to pound sand. Thank you to our friends. We're very proud of the work that you're doing. We appreciate that you're holding the line out there.
There's a great line in that story. The company came to the US for a meeting, and apparently the whole idea was that they were going to ask the Trump administration to remove the blacklist and some of the sanctions activity. And the quote there was the company was not forthcoming in its motives for seeking the meeting. So they were turned away. It's funny.
Just, I think we need to give credit where credit is due. Thank you to our friends that are out there holding the fort.
And another story we never touched was that the fact that the NSO was ordered to pay nearly 170 million to WhatsApp in that lawsuit. This is a throwaway story that's been on our list for a long time. So
I assume they flew over here to deliver the check or something. That's what they were probably looking for.
Absolutely. Anything else?
And the other thing, how did we not talk about this story that AJ dropped about the telemessage heap dumps?
Dude, look, this idea that we can't have a 3-hour episode is some corporate bullshit. Is what it is.
Next episode. Shout out to AJ for an amazing story.
Thank you, folks. It's been great. We are 2 hours and 30 minutes in, which is the perfect sweet spot. Whatever we miss, we miss. Now, I'm not fucking listening to any of those folks. What we miss, we miss. What we talk about is what we talk about.
So we get a Spotify contract like Joe Rogan, then we will be having our 5-hour episodes.
Thank you, gentlemen, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.